We'll call the meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jay.
Here.
Brandy. Here. Mark.
Here.
Eric.
Here.
Jeff.
Here.
Kurt.
Present.
Nancy. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, we have a full assembly tonight. It's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next thing on the agenda is awards presentation. So, Officer Hamilton.
I'd lift it up, I wonder. Mike.
Mandy Smida, please step forward.
Captain, would you like this to be a little higher?
Thank you. On May 5th, 2017, an apartment fire was reported at the Narrows Inn in Petersburg, Alaska. After learning of the fire, Mandy Smida ran to the apartment to attempt to extinguish the fire and rescue the occupant. He displayed great personal courage and disregard for his personal safety by twice entering the apartment full of dense toxic smoke and burning bedding. He removed a burning mattress and searched for the occupant prior to first responders arriving on the scene. But for his selfless actions, the severely injured occupant would not have survived. Please join me in congratulating Mandy Smida on this citizen. Celia Escatel. I guess he wasn't able to come tonight, but I'll go ahead and read this citation anyway. On May 5th, 2017, an apartment fire was reported at the Narrows Inn in Petersburg, Alaska. After learning of the fire, Mr. Escatel joined another individual in running to the apartment, which was filled with dense toxic smoke and burning bedding. Using brute strength, he forced the door open, allowing entry for the attempt to locate the occupant within. Mr. Escatel showed great personal courage and disregard for his personal safety in gaining access to a burning apartment and providing support in the attempt to extinguish the fire and locate the injured residents. Without his assistance, the severely injured occupant would not have survived. Please join me in congratulating Mr. Celio Escatel on this Citizen Certificate of Merit. Shauna Rossi, is she here? On May 5th, 2017, an apartment fire was reported at the Narrows Inn in Petersburg, Alaska. Officer Rossi, who's not here tonight and is represented by his son, and other officers were the initial responders on scene. Assuming a leadership role, he twice entered the apartment, which was full of dense toxic smoke with extremely limited visibility, before locating the severely injured occupant. Leading another officer, he entered the apartment a third time and completed the rescue. But for his intrepidity and disregard for his personal safety, the occupant would have suffered further possible fatal injuries. Please join me in congratulating Officer Callan Rossi on this Medal of Valor. Tate.
We get that.
On May 5th, 2017, an apartment fire was reported at the Narrows Inn in Petersburg, Alaska. Officer Tate and other officers were the initial responders on the scene. Officer Tate provided assistance during the first two entries into the apartment. Once the occupant was located, he then entered the apartment full of dense toxic smoke with limited visibility with another officer and rescued the severely injured occupant. But for his intrepidity and disregard for his personal safety, the occupant would have suffered further possible fatal injuries. Please join me in congratulating Officer Carl Tate on this Medal of Valor. Officer Derek Corson. On May 5th, 2017, an apartment fire was reported at the Narrows Inn in Petersburg, Alaska. Officer Torson and other officers were the initial first responders on scene. After assessing the situation, he took the timely action of breaking the front plate glass window to reduce the level of dense toxic smoke and increasing visibility, enabling a search for the occupant. His foresight and continued assistance to the other officers resulted in the successful rescue of the severely injured occupant. He then continued in his efforts to ensure occupants had exited the building and were accounted for. But for his intrepidity and disregard for his personal safety, the occupant would have suffered further possible fatal injuries. Please join me in congratulating Officer Derek Corson on this Distinguished Service Medal. Now I have some other presentations to hand out here. Alaska has an organization called the Alaska Police Standards Council, and their job is to set the training requirements and standards for the hiring and retention of police officers throughout the state. The state has 3 levels of certification, and police officers must receive one of these levels of certification in order to work as an officer in the state. Within the first 18 months, they have to at least obtain a basic certificate. With continuing education, training, and experience, officers can attain higher levels of certification, and that assists them in furthering their career. As an example, one of the requirements that we have for Chief of Police here is an advanced certificate, which Chief Swihart got about 10 years ago. Sergeant Jim Kerr. I'm presenting Sergeant Kerr with his advanced certificate and his intermediate certificate from the Alaska Police Standards Council, which was signed by Chief Swihart, who is the chairman of the Alaska Police Standards Council. Investigator Pop. Investigator Pop has been with us about 11 years now, and he recently got the requisite training and experience. He has now been issued an intermediate certificate by the APSC. Officer Lewis Wachter. Officer Wachter has completed the Basic Police Academy. He completed that back in November, and he has worked the requisite 12 consecutive months with a single agency, and he has now got his basic certificate from the APSC. Congratulations.
Nice. Okay, very good. Thanks. Good job, everyone. Next item on the agenda is there's approval of minutes. There's no minutes for approval at this meeting, so I would imagine we'll see those at our next regular meeting. Item 5, we'll take a short break and wait for people to clear out. I knew we should have charged admission right when they came in and would have been better. Okay, that brings us to item 5 on this evening's agenda, and that item is amendment and approval of tonight's meeting agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve that. Member Walherder.
Mr. Mayor, I really hate to add one more thing to the agenda, but under discussion items, I want to just read one little paragraph into the record on the original ordinance of 1980 for the senior citizen sales tax exemption. That might clear up a little bit of air here, so I'll make it really brief.
Okay, remind me.
Okay.
I might be tired by then. So, is there any other amendments to tonight's meeting agenda? We'll add one under Borough discussion items or Assembly discussion items, so I'd entertain a roll call vote to approve tonight's Assembly meeting agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
I was going to say, we didn't even have a motion, so.
So move.
Second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we have, okay. So we'll move forward with the meeting agenda as amended. Public hearings. There are 6 public hearings tonight. So if anybody in the audience wants to participate in these public hearings or have discussion on these the 6 ordinances that we're going to go over, most of them for the restructuring, now's the time to put your opinions forward. But I guess if you forget something later in the agenda, there's visitors' views related to items on the agenda. You could also add something there if you would like. So don't be afraid to get up and speak at either one. So the first public hearing this evening is on Ordinance 2018-04. And that's an ordinance amending Chapter 3.08 of the Municipal Code entitled Assembly and Mayor to add agenda formation language and to amend the deadline for submission of items to be included on an agenda. Is there anybody this evening that would like to participate in this public hearing? Seeing none, we'll move to the second public hearing. And this is public hearing for Ordinance 2018-05. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 14.16 of the Municipal Code entitled Electricity to amend the title to Electric Utility, to provide for a utility director as head of the Electric Utility Department, and to establish fines for violations of provisions of Chapter 14.16. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to under the public hearing for this ordinance? Okay.
Question?
Yes?
Is this concerning, is that ordinance right there concerning Carl Herdman?
Restructuring.
It's considering restructuring, and so you wouldn't have a public power night superintendent. You would have so that was the time to talk about that. And these other 4 or 5 kind of hit on the same.
I just don't want, I want to make sure that I get a chance to briefly speak.
Now's the time. Now's the time.
I don't know my dad, he's better speak. So as you can see, I came semi-unprepared. No piece of paper, no nothing. Oh yes, my name's Nathan Midkiff. I'm the head electrician down at Icicle Seafoods, Petersburg, Alaska. I've been working there as an electrician for roughly 40 years. And over time, I have seen, if you work somewhere for 40 years, of course you see people, you start with people that are extremely knowledgeable within the plant. I can hear myself just fine, but thank you. And over time, I have observed and I have watched people with knowledge retire, quit out of PFI, whether it be Stan Reed, Dennis Jones, Bill Haley, lots of people that on the mechanical end that have retired out. They have not always been replaced. I said not always, with the same caliber of person. When that happens, what happens is somebody else has to pick that slack up. That's going to fall on whoever's capable of doing it. It's also nice as a worker to be able to go up and to talk to somebody about an issue that you're having, and to have that person understand what you're talking about. Now, I understand budget restraints. I run a household. I have a wife, I have kids. I understand budget restraints. I understand that everybody needs to cut, and at some point you do have to cut. I understand that. But I don't think this is the time. not in this position. So I stand opposed to the reorganization as it so stands. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Midgift. So is there anyone else in the audience that would like to participate in the public hearing? Okay, ma'am, and then Robert after that. Please state your name and who you represent for the record. Thank you.
It's going to be too tall now.
My name is Candy Woodworth, and I live at 848 Mitkoff Highway. I moved to Yuma, Arizona, and I have been a permanent resident in Petersburg since 2015. I would like to express my feelings regarding the borough's inclination to accept Carl Hagerman as the electrical superintendent. I believe that a relationship is being promoted by the borough that is resembling favoritism. There has been in place for 25 years the very specific qualifications for the electrical department head, the electrical superintendent position. Joe, who met those very specific qualifications and held that position for years, has retired. Now I believe it was the city manager that has handpicked a certain individual without any electrical experience, I might add, to fill the electrical superintendent position. But there was a problem. The very specific job description must be rewritten and dumbed down to match this certain individual's experience. Even with the rewritten job description, I don't believe this position was posted for others to apply. It was under the radar, so to speak. These actions may not be illegal, but despicably unethical. This creates a situation that is hazardous to honest accountability in the future for the borough, if the position was obtained as a favor. It goes by the name of good old boy relationship. And in politics and in government, the strings of partiality should not be attached, especially when it is a department head. Think about it. A department head should be unbiased, making their recommendations to the borough for the good of the community. You will be hard-pressed to convince me that Carl will not owe a favor or that the city manager won't have extra influence over the electrical department.
It'd be better if you would give your testimony and not mention individuals' names. At this point, we don't have anybody specifically picked for this position, so I would appreciate it if you could do that.
I stand corrected.
Thank you.
I bring this to the borough's attention because I experienced, I was an owner of a underground utility company in Yuma, Arizona for 30 years before I moved here. And I saw it develop like this in the city of Yuma departments over that 30 years that I lived in Yuma. It gave the city a terrible reputation within the community and caused infighting within the city departments. Before I close, I would like to also remind you of one more item. The Electrical Enterprise Fund. Today, it is funded for the electrical infrastructure and other electrical associated items. That is all. I want all the citizens of Petersburg to keep a watchful eye on this fund. Its millions of dollars should not be usurped or dipped into for the general fund or any other project. The inexperienced individual that is being promoted for the electrical superintendent position as a department head may not understand completely the importance of maintaining this fund for future electrical upgrades to the community. Thank you for your consideration. Respectfully submitted by myself, and I represent myself. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else? Robert, you're next. And during your testimony, if you would not name any individuals, and right now we're just talking about changing some wording, and there's no specific names associated with that in any of these ordinances, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I won't be mentioning any names. Thank you.
Your name, please.
My name is Robert Larson. I've been a resident of Petersburg for 33 years, and I would like to share some thoughts on reorganization regarding the electrical department. I consider myself a knowledgeable person. I was a member of the Thomas Bay Power Authority for many years, last year as its president, as the chair of that body. We were charged with providing for operations and maintenance of the Tyee Lake hydroelectric plant, plus the intertie between Wrangell and Petersburg. If you look at the documents transferring that responsibility to SEPA, you'll see my signature down at the bottom, as in addition to other ones. I'm also Petersburg's past voting member on the board for SEPA. I enjoyed that experience very much. I've also been a member of a labor management council that represented the interests of over 600 employees, professional, technical, and administrative folks in administering the provisions of a labor management contract. That experience has provided me with a good working knowledge of the roles and responsibilities, not only of our employees, but of managers and management itself. I'm concerned that the Assembly has downplayed the primary purpose of the head of the electrical department. I would like to couch the next little bit of a discussion in terms of risk management. Where is the risk, and where is the primary purpose of the department and the person that leads this department? I think we all agree the electrical department provides an essential service that's critical to this community. We have to have dependable electricity. Most aspects of the daily operations and decisions regarding maintenance, planning, and coordination of actions with Wrangell, we're joined with Wrangell because of our power sales agreement, are technical in nature. For example, at every SEPA meeting or the meeting of the Thomas Bay Power Authority, Joe Nelson, my only reference to a person, provided valuable knowledge and advice that contributed to the safe and efficient delivery of electrical service to these two communities. And I would extend that through the SEPA program to the community of Ketchikan. So, in the proposed action, 2018-05 is what I'm speaking to specifically, I do not see who's responsible for deciding whether an electrical line should be placed above ground or underground, whether it should be designed to have 100 volts or 100,000 volts. Is these instrumentations and switches, are these analog or are they digital? There's a huge, an unlimited source of daily decisions that are made by the electrical superintendent that provide for the safe, effective distribution of electricity in this town. The borough is lucky to have a well-trained electrical crew. They expect and they deserve direction from somebody that truly is aware of the needs and requirements of our electrical distribution system. In summary, I'd like to reiterate that the primary purpose of the head of the electrical department is technical in nature, and a person with appropriate experience and training in this field is necessary. If we decide, you decide to have a utility director, that's your choice, but I would recommend so forcefully that the requirements of understanding and being familiar with an electrical distribution system be paramount in that job description. because that is the most critical function. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larson, for your comments. Yeah, Marge? Yeah, and should be a little bit aware of the time, and I haven't been keeping time in these testimonies, but if you could limit it to 5 minutes is by code. We'd like to have it 3, but I'll kind of keep an eye on the clock. Thanks.
Yeah.
State your name, Marge.
My name is Marge Oinus, and I'm a single woman that lives in a very old house. And my dad worked on electrical issues for the city and for Tyee for a good portion of his life. And I will fix my own electrical problems until I get scared. And then I call an electrician. The electrician who did come to fix something said, I have never seen in an old house an electrical system that is as good as this. And I said, well, that was my dad. And I know that he was extremely concerned and interested in the whole electrical aspect of Petersburg. And so I have also been following in the paper people that write to the editor concerning this electrical issue. And I started out agreeing with what the council was going to do to hire, how do I say it? To hire someone without the training or whatever, if that's good enough. But after last week's paper, I thought, you know what? I'm changing my mind. I think we should go with what Mr. Larson has said, that you should not consider, that you should consider seriously hiring someone with training.
Okay, thank you for your testimony, Marge. And you have extra minutes next time because you stayed under your time. Anybody else in the audience that would like to testify under the public hearing for Ordinance 2018-05? Okay, excuse me for the cold here. That public hearing is now closed, and we'll move to public hearing for Ordinance 2018-06. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 1404 of the Municipal Code entitled Water to amend the title to Water Utility to provide for a utility director as head of the Water Utility Department and to establish fines for violations of provisions of this chapter. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to testify under this public hearing? Okay, seeing no interest, we'll move on to item D under public hearings, and that's a public hearing for Ordinance 2018-07, an ordinance amending Chapter 14.08 of the Municipal Code entitled Sewer to amend the title to Sewer Utility, to provide for a utility director as head of the Sewer Utility Department, and to establish fines for violations of provisions of Chapter 14.08. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to testify under this public hearing? Seeing none, we'll move to the next public hearing, which is item E. This is a public hearing for Ordinance 2018-08, an ordinance providing for Chapter 3.76 of the Municipal Code entitled Administrative Officers and Appeals Process, updating current language to reflect Borough Incorporation. Is there anybody interested in testifying? Seeing none, we'll move to the next public hearing, item E. This is a public hearing for Ordinance 2018-08, an ordinance providing for Chapter 3.76 of the Municipal Code entitled Administrative Officers and Appeals Process, updating current language to reflect Borough Incorporation. Being no interest, we'll move to item F, and that's a public hearing for Ordinance 2018-09, an ordinance amending Chapter 3.38 of the Municipal Code entitled Public Works Department to remove operation responsibilities for the water utility and sewer utility from the Public Works Director duties. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to participate in this public hearing? Seeing none, we'll move to item G, and that's a public hearing for Ordinance 2018-10, an ordinance amending Chapter 3.40 of the Municipal Code, entitled Electric Utility, to amend the title to Electric Utility, Water Utility, and Sewer Utility Departments, and to provide for the three utilities to be the operation responsibilities of the utility director. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to testify under this public hearing? Okay, seeing none. Public hearings for the evening are closed. Excuse me again. That moves us to item 7, bid awards. There are no, are you going to read those 4 letters in under the public or
Visitors' views?
Okay, on the next, all right. There are no bid awards. The next item on the agenda is visitors' views related to items on this evening's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that has any views related to items on the agenda? Okay, we'll start with Mr. Gilliland. Could you please step forward and state your name and who you represent, Harvey?
Harvey Gilliland, and I represent myself. I've gone back and forth a number of times trying to decide if I wanted to visit you again about senior tax exemption cards, but I've had a number of people tell me that they liked my input previously, so here I am again to pester you some more. I don't want to see our town fail fiscally, and as I've said before, I don't mind paying my share. A week or so before speaking at your last meeting, I talked to Jody Tao. We visited about a number of things related to taxation. From my view of a need for a state income tax, which could help communities as well as the state, a partial remedy by a higher sales tax cap, which Jody reminded me failed by a large margin not long ago, and finally the reason for my visit, that of the senior exemption card. Please forgive me, Jody, if I'm off base, but I came away with the impression that renewing the exemption cards every year is just the way it's always been done, and there's evidently a large concern about my card being out there after I kick the bucket. Because of my work long ago, often taking me to Juneau, I got a sales tax exemption card from the city and borough of Juneau. And it was because I was eligible because I lived out of town. It didn't have an expiration date. I don't know if they still have that policy. I finally threw that card away recently when cleaning out my wallet. 20 years ago, when I became 60, I got a free trapping, hunting, and sport fishing license, which does not expire. I have an FCC amateur radio license that's good for 10 years at a time. Also, even my Alaska driver's license is good for 5 years. If I die tomorrow, my license is still out there. It seems like none of my heirs or anyone else would even try to utilize those licenses or privileges after I die. Also, you started out talking about charging seniors $60 for a card that said to cost that much to produce, then bumped it up to $100. If it actually cost $60, then the general fund coffers would only gain $40. With a phone call, I learned that there are currently 559 senior exemption cards. So each year, to renew the cards, there's an expense of $33,540. It seems to me that that amount could be saved every year by either the seniors or the town if the cards did not need to be renewed. When most everyone, including the town, has budget problems, it doesn't make sense to spend unnecessarily. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilliland. And I believe there were some other hands up in the audience. Marge, you want to, or how about we go, Bob, you want to come up and testify? Well, Mr. Martin, I should say. Can you please state your name and who you represent?
I'm Bob Martin. I'm here with the Harbor Board. We lost our chairman. We're sorry to say that, and sorry to be here under those circumstances. I'd like to talk about item J on the agenda, the petro land trade. spelled out very well in the packet. The harbor master has created a document about all the maintenance needs and the need for secure storage space, dry space, sometimes heated space, and right now the maintenance staff works out of some connexes in various parking lots and storage areas, and it's it's gotten us by, but it's not a good long-term solution. It's not good for crew morale and crew efficiency, and we're in the maintenance of our harbors for the long run, so I think it's time to look really closely at this land swap with Petro. It would give us a building. It's not luxurious by any means, but it's more than adequate, and if you compare it to the cost of building new, I think it's a good deal, a good opportunity that won't be there forever, and Harbor Board was unanimously for it. We've been for it in the past, and I hope you'll give it a good look and listen to what Harbor Master has to say when it comes up. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Martin, for your testimony. Okay, Mr. Lynch?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Assembly members. My name is Brian Lynch. I've been a Petersburg resident since 1981. I have about 4 items here I'd like to briefly discuss. First one is 16C, the DNR letter to the concerning the land transfer to Petersburg. For sense of disclosure here, I sit on the Petersburg Economic Development Council, and we talked about and we passed on this letter as it is right now, and it is a good letter. It gets to the point, but something I brought up during the meeting I didn't think was forceful enough. I look at what is being done here as actually a breach of trust by DNR, and maybe even getting a little more hardcore. It may even be basically a lie by omission. Now, granted, they have been developing this plan for logging these areas for a while, and it isn't going to take effect for about 4 years, but they should have informed us, and I really, hopefully you send this letter on to DNR, and I would even recommend to be even more forceful. Whether or not you do that, I think the letter is adequate right now, but I think they need to be put on notice that what they were doing is just wrong. The next one is senior citizens tax exemption issue 15A. I actually agree with the ordinance. I do understand. I would personally like to see it $100, but I understand the idea of it being taxation any higher than 60. Regardless of what you do with this, something at some point, maybe even more drastic, is going to have to be done here. We're losing about, as you well know, about $300,000 a year based on this, and that's a lot of money. And what I would like to do tonight basically is appeal to people like myself, and also a disclosure, I turn 65 at the end of March, so whatever you do here and whatever is done will affect me. I would like to appeal to everybody, such as myself, who can afford to pay your sales tax, to please do so. There's a lot of people here that, they leave this town for a long period of time on recreational purposes and whatnot, and they can afford to do that, I think. And at some point, I hope to be going on longer excursions, on a vacation and whatnot. But I really would like to appeal to people to do this. I mean, we get situations where you have water shortages. They ask for voluntary reduction in water use, and normally citizens, stand up and do what's necessary. We have a revenue shortage, and I would really like to see people who can afford to do so pay your sales tax, regardless of if you have a senior citizens exemption or even if you pass this ordinance. Marine passengers fee 15B. I encourage passage of this. I don't think you really should be all that worried about the Juneau lawsuit. From what I understand, that had to do more with how the money was being spent. I think if you're very specific about how you're going to spend this money, I don't think you're going to run into a problem. In fact, it's kind of interesting. I do these dock walks for these small cruise ships that come through here and guiding visitors around the docks, explaining the fisheries and the vessels and whatnot. And I can't say for sure, but I think a lot of these people would actually agree with a passenger's fee. In fact, a lot of them would probably think we're stupid for not collecting a fee on them. And if it's $5, that's good enough. And I think that would fill the bill. Last one, 16B, Open Meetings Act. I don't really want to see you go to a second opinion here. I don't want you wasting the taxpayers' money getting a second opinion from an attorney. And if you don't trust your attorney, then maybe you ought to fire them and get a new one. What you really should do is develop a policy for the use of emails, texts, etc. And I think if you do that, you're going to avoid running into a problem. But I would suggest, rather than getting another opinion, take the attorney's opinion and realize there probably are some vagaries in there in the laws, but develop a policy so you all and future assemblies know what is required of them, possibly even get some training on that through AML or whatever. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Is there anybody else in the audience with views related to the agenda?
Good evening. My name is Janet Holton, and I am representing myself. I would like to speak to item 16D, resolution number 2018-06, a resolution setting regular Borough Assembly meeting start times to 6 p.m. And I hadn't planned on being here tonight because after seeing 7 public hearings ahead of item 8 and considering that the weather report was going to be snow dumping on us all day, I had prepared this for Debbie to read, but it turned out I could be here, and so I want to speak to this. So thank you. I am not in favor of Resolution 2018-06. I don't attend very many assembly meetings, but when I do, I prefer to take time off during the day rather than the evening to attend, because my evenings, they're often jam-packed, and Mondays in particular. So having the opportunity to at least listen to a meeting during the daytime is of great value to me. I really value knowing what's going on and being able to at least listen to a meeting if I can't attend. And, I don't get those opportunities at night. When this section of the code was set, it allowed for both day and night meetings for travel safety purposes for people that were off Mitkoff Island. And in light of our snowstorm that didn't occur, I believe that these dual times benefit more than just the residents who live off the island. And I don't think that was probably the only intent, was that they would be able to attend day meetings. I think it benefits a lot of people to have the opportunity to either, listen to a daytime meeting or attend as their choose. My situation is unique to me, and there are over 3,000 other residents of the borough that have their own unique set of circumstances. Please consider what is best for as many as you can when determining this time change. And thank you for your service to the borough and for this opportunity to express my views.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wants to testify? You could lower it down, Joel, if you want.
It's a great spot there. Thank you for the opportunity to comment, Mr. Mayor and Borough Assembly. I ask for
State your name,
support.
please, and who you
I'm
represent.
sorry, Joe Rander, speaking for myself. Commercial fisherman, I live in Petersburg here for most of my life, 52 years. I'm asking that you have support for the commercial fishing fleet and the sea otter. I know you're going to discuss that later in a meeting, but it's come before the board before, or the Borough Assembly, before, and I'd like you to see move past that quickly and not get bogged down in meetings if you're going to have a meeting about it. The reason is, it seems that the time is now to comment on that, and I ask that you either come up with an action letter or a resolution or whatever action you may seem necessary to do that. But I just attended Board of Fish this last January of this year in Sitka, and it was in two parts. One was shellfish portion at first, and the second was finfish. And the fishermen are coming to the board now as a cry for help and getting something done, and not so much as trying to limit themselves or limit time and area for fisheries, but just telling the board that time is coming where we're not going to have any more areas to work on. The sea otter is a very aggressive species, and no one is advocating for extermination of the entire species, but we do need to have a management plan put in place. The House and Senate just came out with resolutions. I don't know if you've kept up with that or read those. They're a pretty good read, and they're getting more to the heart of the problem is not having a management plan for this aggressive predator in our ecosystem and the effects of that. I also might turn you to some of the notes from the Board of Fish meeting. One of them is RC. It's a record copy is what that stands for, 23 from Mike Lockaby and Wrangell. And it's very well done. Has a lot of data and a lot of federal data. It's not just his own opinion on things. He was also at the Board of Fish meeting there in Sitka. So I know that I haven't seen the letters, and I know there has been some letters sent in to the borough here. I know there was one letter I heard that was in disapproval of it, and I would hope that we could come to an agreement with individuals that may have a disagreement so we can move forward with this species that is having a devastating effect, and not just the commercial fisheries, but all user groups, subsistence, personal use. There's areas that are very affected by the sea otter, and they continue to move, and as fishermen, anecdotally, we're seeing them move further and further into other grounds. So, well, thank you very much for your time. That's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Rander, for your testimony.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to testify on their views related to the agenda?
My name is Bob Lynn. In this case, I'm representing myself. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly. I want to talk about 2018-06, and I hadn't thought about it until Janet was here. When this borough was created, it was intended at the time by that assembly to provide opportunity for both people inside and outside of Service Area 1 to come before this group. By having both meetings in the evening, that makes it really, really hard for anybody that lives outside of Service Area 1, whether it be at Papke's Landing, across the water, or out in Duncan Canal, to make the meeting. And I'll use myself as an example. To come to this meeting tonight, I started out about noon to come here. I can't go home because of the water out there, and it's pretty doggone dark. And so I have to find a place overnight. Luckily, I have one. And I've heard a number of other folks say the same thing. They won't come in at night because of the same situation I ran. Plus, they don't have a place to stay. Along with that, I've heard a number of us talk about, well, we never have anybody from outside Service Area 1 come here. Well, really? Well, let's put that a little bit in perspective in my mind. We have, 170 people outside Service Area 1 that are residents, and we have 2,800 in here. So that means in my mind that if we have one person from outside in here, then we should at least have 16 or 17 in here. Have we had it when I was here? I think so. But if you remember back, a lot of those issues we had during the day when people from outside Service Area 1 showed up. The last thing I'd like to talk about is that in the preamble to our charter, we talk specifically in there about creating an atmosphere where, and I want to quote a little bit on this, this charter provides maximum public participation in borough decision-making processes. If you put both meetings at night, then to my mind, then you've taken the minority that are outside of town and putting them at a lesser value than those inside of town or inside Service Area 1. So my recommendation to you is keep it like it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Is there anyone else in the audience with views related to the agenda? Marge?
My name is Marge Joinus. I'm speaking for myself, and after listening to Bob, I'd like to speak to what he spoke to. I wasn't planning to, but I love it when I get convinced about something that I was feeling the other way about. I just read about having the meetings at night, and I thought, yippee, much easier. After listening to Bob, I think no. I think we should keep it the same, because he really had something good to say. And saying that, this idea of being able to change our minds, I hate to bring this up, but in talking about the senior citizen tax issue, it seems like, though we come and share things with the council, which is really a wonderful privilege, it's like there isn't any way to get you to change your mind from the direction you're kind of heading. And it's kind of discouraging. And it sort of seems like, well, we're being invited to share in something that's futile. And I just want to say that, and I hope that along the way, somewhere along the line, you can change your minds on some of the ideas that you have. And one of which is the senior tax. I really like Harvey Gilliland's idea. If the issue is saving money by processing, his idea to give you one card is fantastic. And I think, but maybe that's not the real issue. The issue is not to save, but to get more money. And so charging $100 and just every year, that's a way to get more money. So I'm thinking, I wish that you would be more transparent in your thinking or sharing, that what you really want is more money. And that's okay. But instead of saying reducing the processing charges, just say we want more money. And after listening to, I forget who it was, he was talking about, I hope that all the seniors or whoever would be willing to pay their taxes. I thought, I would give my card up if the idea on this if my card and not using it would save enough money to hire someone with superintendent electrical skills. I know it doesn't mean anything as far as amount, but that's another idea. So my one last question is, it's a bribe. In the senior tax exemption thing, in the red on page 2, it talks about the card fee will be waived to a senior citizen that has signed an affidavit at the Borough Finance Office attesting that they are 65 years and older, is a permanent resident of the borough, and all combined household income does not exceed $20,000. I just really wish you could define what household is, because I live alone and have often thought of getting in a roommate to live with me to save on costs. So if that roommate happens to be rich and they have a super income in retirement, does that mean that what I bring in at $1,400 a month and what she brings in at whatever amount, you combine that total, and then therefore I could not have a senior tax card? Is that what that household means?
I'm not sure what the definition of household is, Marge, and maybe we could get that answer from the clerk, but then we need to move on to the next person.
I can answer that, I guess. That's how it's written right now. It's copied from the Water, Wastewater, and Sanitation Ordinance on how to qualify for a half off of your base fee if you're a low-income senior. So we just took the wording from that. So Yeah, currently that's how that's written. It can be changed, but currently what's in there, you're correct.
So it isn't a husband and wife with one Social Security, it'd be whoever lives there, you combine their total income. That's what it means right now.
Yes, unless you had a definition for household as something else.
Well, that's something you guys would have to choose, right?
Correct. We could amend that ordinance to, or I don't know how we would approach it.
I guess that before you vote to take this, I would request that you define what household is, so that you're not voting on something you don't know what you're voting on.
Okay, I think that was the definition, but
Yeah,
thank you,
sorry.
Marge.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience with visitors' views related to the agenda tonight?
My name is Bob Zemke, and I'm representing myself. Sorry I didn't have a statement prepared. I don't have anything prepared. I'm shooting from the hip, basically. May of last year, Joe Nelson announced his retirement. There was not much done as far as finding his replacement then. June, he retired. There wasn't very little done to find a replacement at that time. The election happened. Pretty much the general public stated what they wanted to see out of, as far as the superintendent went. The vote of the people, which you represent, was for a superintendent, more or less, not directly, but more or less, the people wanted to see a superintendent. That didn't happen. Just earlier today, there was I heard an assemblyman had mentioned that lost my train of thought. So I'd like to see a work session. You could at least have a work session for this issue, to whether or not there should be a superintendent, or there should be. There has never been a work session for this. Why hasn't this been completed? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zemke. Anyone else in the audience with views related to items on this evening's agenda? Please state your name and who you represent.
Yeah, my name is Adam Day, and I represent myself. This is in regards to Power and Light restructure. There's been a lot of people that have weighed in on this restructuring, some that are concerned citizens, some that are business owners, some that are very qualified and experienced in the field that is going to be under discussion here tonight. Coupled with that, there's a plethora of letters that have been submitted by professionals that have spent their lives in the field of electrical utilities. As Assembly members, it's your responsibility to answer to the people that have voted you in to the position you hold. I don't pretend to understand the pressures that come from that responsibility. I thank you for the time and the commitment to what you do for this town and its people. That being said, this topic of restructuring is no small matter. This could potentially change things for a long time to come for the people of this community. To think that you, as council members, should not seriously evaluate this decision being made based on what you're hearing from all of these sources I've spoke of about here would be doing a disservice to the people who put you in the position you're in, and a disservice to this community. I would assume that according to the votes of the Assembly that there are quite a few people in this community and people with knowledge and expertise in this field saying this is a good idea. But thus far, the majority of people, citizens and professionals that have spoken, are saying don't do this. It's not a good idea. I encourage the Assembly to truly consider whether this is a good thing for this community based on feedback of the community and on the concerns of the professionals. Anything less would again be a disservice to this community. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Is there anyone else in the audience with views related to items on this evening's agenda? Oh.
Do them in order.
That works, thank you.
Please state your name and who you represent.
My name is TJ Daw. I represent myself. Also, I'm an electrical contractor here in Petersburg. I own Nordic Electric. I just want to say I'm in opposition to this restructuring. There is a lot of talk that's been not just managing power distribution and whatnot. There's a secondary side from the pole to the house, and when that happens, you have the National Electric Code, which I am governed by, and that's what I go by. I have 16 hours a year of continuing education to keep up on this. It's anywhere from grounding, ampacities, wire sizes, etc. I just want to make it known that, this is my livelihood, and this is a huge deal. And thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Daw, for your testimony. Anyone else in the audience with views related to items on this evening's agenda? I'll ask one more time after the clerk reads these letters into the record.
I have 5 letters to read, and I'm going to read them in the order that I received them. The first one is from Cruise Line Agencies of Alaska. Dear Mayor Jensen, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the proposed $5 per passenger fee currently under consideration by the Borough Assembly. Generally, the industry does not oppose local communities raising revenues for services. What is important is how those funds are used. We recognize that hosting cruise passengers requires harbor facilities, and the proposed ordinance is one of several methods which could be utilized. However, we encourage careful consideration of the following points. The proposed ordinance is estimated to raise only a very small amount of funds for the borough. It seems the administration of the fee with verifying ship manifests and the collecting audit of the fee will not be worth the time and cost. Additional costs do impact cruise operations, and as we have seen in Alaska, passenger fees can have an impact upon local business. If the fee adds costs without a benefit to the ship, ships could decide to not call the port, subjecting the borough to not only the loss of the fee, but additional sales as well. The better policy is to work with the industry and encourage ship visits so more sales tax revenue can be realized. Cruise Line Agencies of Alaska works with several small ships that are slightly over the 250 passenger minimum to trigger payment of the $34.50 state passenger fee. For these vessels, $5 per passenger per port is shared to each community by the state of Alaska. Under this ordinance, these ships would pay the borough twice. The ordinance language is problematic as well. Of the 1,000-plus ports cruise lines operate around the world, the Borough of Petersburg selected language from the one community which is currently being challenged in court. The broad nature of the proposed ordinance to allow for funding of services to passengers and not just vessels is at the heart of the legal debate between Cruise Lines International Association Alaska and the City and Borough of Juneau. Regardless of the Assembly's view on the Juneau litigation, it is not prudent to adopt such broad language that will most likely be determined to go further than federal law and the U.S. Constitution permits. Cruise Line Agencies of Alaska recognizes that dock infrastructure is a necessary and legitimate expenditure for the industry. We work with port communities across Southeast to help match the level of visitation desired with infrastructure that best accommodates the vessels. From our experience working in the industry, we recommend you table the ordinance and work with the industry to narrow the focus of the language or craft an acceptable dock fee which could assist with your harbor infrastructure. Thank you for your consideration. Rick Erickson, Cruise Line Agencies of Alaska. This is from Dave Carlson. Dear Mayor Jensen and Assembly members, I recently became aware of your discussions to reorganize Petersburg Power and Light and appoint Carl Hagerman as a part-time director of Petersburg's electric utility. I believe this is a very risky and foolhardy move. Let me explain. Petersburg has been extremely fortunate to have had two very capable and highly qualified power and light superintendents over the past 35 or so years. Dennis Lewis was hired in the early 1980s and was followed by Joe Nelson some 20 years later. Both Dennis and Joe's contributions were immense. Without Dennis and Joe's thorough knowledge of the complexity and nuances of electric generation, transmission, and distribution, things might look extremely different in Petersburg from an electrical perspective than they do today. Both provided key leadership and represented Petersburg very well. The results speak for themselves. Petersburg has some of the lowest power rates in the state. Reliability has increased throughout their tenure because they understood the intermixed generation and transmission system and were proactive and vocal in mitigating substantial risks. Diesel generation is almost non-existent. All these factors didn't happen by accident. They occurred because Dennis and Joe knew what they were doing. I understand that the reasoning behind the intended reorganization is to save money. Finding ways to save money should always be a goal of good management. However, it is folly to think you will save money by hiring a part-time replacement to run power and light, especially one with no electric utility experience. You need to heed the letter from the head electrician at Petersburg Fisheries. You need to heed the letter from Clay Hammer, Wrangell Light and Power's superintendent. You need to heed the letters from Don Koenigs and others who advise you not to make this move. If you don't have a superintendent who thoroughly understands the complexity and nuances of power generation, transmission, and distribution, along with the inherent risks wrapped up with the entire system, you are asking for trouble. Because SEPA owns the Tyee and Swan hydroelectric projects, you are tied at the hip with Wrangell and Ketchikan. This interconnected generation and transmission system is complex and not without substantial risk. You need to hire a superintendent who has the background and technical experience to fully understand this system. There has to be an ongoing high level of coordination between SEPA, the operators of the hydro projects, and the interconnected utilities, Wrangell and Ketchikan. You simply can't do this with a part-time utility director who does not have the requisite background. Sure, it's going to cost to hire someone with the qualifications needed to replace Joe Nelson. People with these qualifications are in high demand. Frankly, it won't make a dent on the overall finances of Petersburg Power and Light, or the Petersburg City and Borough for that matter. Petersburg businesses and residents rely on very affordable and reliable delivery, and the reliable delivery of power. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish. I can assure you it will cost you in the long run if you continue down this ill-conceived path. Please contact me if you have any questions or want additional clarification. Sincerely, Dave Carlson. This is a letter from Robert Luer. Mayor Jensen, I have followed the restructuring debacle with interest and more than a little disbelief. Putting this plan forth under the unlikelihood that this will save us money borders on, for lack of a better word, absurd. We have police, fire, public works, electric, and administrative departments within the borough. All of these chief and superintendent positions have their own set of job skills, and no one person can do them all effectively. I would forecast another assistant at both the light department and public works. One person retires, two people get promotions and a raise, a real possibility of 2 new employees, and this saves the borough money. How? In the private sector, other than the owner, you also have superintendents and foremen. These people are usually in that position because of knowledge and experience of the work at hand. Good ones are there to teach and mentor and will never ask those under them to do something they are not willing to do themselves. In short, you teach those under you to learn from your experiences and not to repeat your mistakes. You cannot impart knowledge you don't have to others. We all know that you have to pay big money for experience, but let us not forget that we could be paying real big money for the lack of same with one accident. Think about that one. Finally, Mr. Mayor, I haven't seen anything this disruptive in our local government since the Cabin Creek route selection. The people spoke then, and I'm sure they will on this matter. The Borough Assembly needs to remember that they are there at the will of the people to do the work of the people. Do your own personal axe grinding at home and cut your firewood there, not in assembly chambers. Personal agenda items have no place at assembly meetings. You people are the ones that approved the budget you now find yourselves working with, and at this late date want to save money. Your next budget cycle will be here soon. Hopefully everyone will weigh the ramification of their vote. Sincerely, Robert Luer. This letter is from Wally McDonald, Fleet Refrigeration. Petersburg Borough Assembly. The other day I listened on KFSK to Joe Nelson's comments during public testimony on the current proposal to reorganize the Power and Light Department. I greatly respect Joe's opinions and his point of view. As the owner of a licensed mechanical contracting business, I had a good working relationship with Joe for several years. We didn't necessarily agree on everything, but it has been essential to my business to be able to walk into Joe's office and get straight answers on technical issues regarding the local power grid. We both know the technical lingo, so we can get right to specifics on whether a proposed project is doable and how it should best be done. When time is of essence, as when an existing installation is failing, this sort of cooperation is vital to everyone involved. Several years ago, when the price of home heating oil began to climb, the electrical utility had unutilized capacity. When I had calls from customers to replace existing oil-fired heating systems that were nearing the end of their service life in homes and businesses, I was able to meet up with Joe, and he could tell me straight up if the location had adequate service that we could install electric-fired heat, if a neighborhood could support several electric-fired installations, and if and when upgrades to portions of the grid were planned, if three-phase industrial power was an option, and many other necessary details only someone with a technical background can answer. We also both saw what was coming. The more resistance electric heat installations installed, the less surplus power would be available, and the peak electric use shifted from summer to winter. Now, on the coldest day of winter, the draw on the power grid is greatest. This was about the time that advances in VFR technology and in-control systems made air source heat pumps feasible for this climate. I was able to go to Joe and share information, and as Joe was familiar with the technology and applications, we agreed on the advantages. He realized that the efficiency of these systems, which are electrically driven but draw far fewer amps than resistance electric systems, would allow installations without adding significantly to demand. So business and homeowners would not be faced with the costs of upgrading their individual services, and the grid would not be at risk of overloading. Recognizing the benefits and being familiar with incentives offered by other local electric utilities in many areas, he pushed to fund an incentive program to give homeowners cash rebates for installing these efficient systems. I recognize the city manager's efforts in trying to do what we hired him to do, in trying to find a path to balancing a budget during a flat spot in our natural resource-based local economy. We've all been through these cycles before. The future of our local economy is rooted in our infrastructure, and there isn't any part of that infrastructure that is more important than the electrical utility. You may somehow on paper show a short-term savings, but in the long run you risk lost opportunity in maintaining and improving our infrastructure. I hope the Assembly will give some weight to the testimony of several professionals in the mechanical and electrical trades on this issue. We'll respect your electrical department employees' concerns about safety, and you will instruct the city manager to make a more wholehearted effort at finding a qualified electrical superintendent. I've been following this issue through the Petersburg pilot for months. This is an issue which goes straight to my bottom line as a local business person, and I am annoyed that we are relitigating this when the will of the electorate in the last election was clear. Sincerely, Wally McDonald. And from Suzanne Wood. Mr. Mayor and members of the Assembly, my name is Suzanne Wood. The following comments are mine alone, a Petersburg Municipal Power and Light ratepayer. The PMP&L reorganization proposal, Ordinance 2018-10, and related municipal code changes before the Assembly are extensive and may be precedent-setting. Supporting a cost-sharing overhead-only scenario instead of hiring a qualified electrical supervisor for PMP&L may have unintended consequences that may affect the delivery of reliable and affordable electrical energy to Petersburg's commercial and residential ratepayers. Written and verbal communications, adherence to current industry standards and protocols, field experience, and ongoing training are paramount for operational safety. The ability for the design of our local electrical system improvements, which in large part should be most efficiently and cost-effectively accomplished by an in-house supervisor with extensive electrical experience, which in turn could reduce the otherwise total dependence on outside consultants. With the adoption of Ordinance 2018-10, it is difficult to envision a future where Petersburg will ever be able to hire a qualified electrical engineer as supervisor of PMP&L, when the job description would also require the management of the water and sewer utility departments. The skill sets and applicable experience required for one may not necessarily be easily conveyed to the other. Additionally, there exists separate union contracts. In closing, my 8 February 2018 Petersburg pilot letter to the editor summarizes my opinion. Quote, despite the Borough Assembly vote, I strongly support advertising for a successor for Joe Nelson, PMP&L's former electrical superintendent. The demands from an ever-expanding residential/business/tourism customer base, plus SEPA and Crystal Lake Hydro, are too important to relegate to a half-time Public Works-PMP&L reorganization scenario. Relevant technical experience always matters, unquote. Thank you for this opportunity to comment. Suzanne Wood.
Thank you, Debbie. Is there one more opportunity? Is there anyone in the audience that wants to testify under visitors' views related to tonight's agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is item 9, visitors' views unrelated to items on this evening's agenda. Does anybody have any views on topics that aren't listed on our agenda this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to, hit the wrong button again. Board, Commission, and Committee reports. Sorry to keep you guys waiting so long. We have a report from Mr. Bob Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to report back from the last SEPA meeting I attended. There's a number of items on there. I provided some information in the packet, some of which I won't go over, but there's 2 items off that I really would like to talk about. One is the board authorized to put out for a contract to have a remote operated vehicle to put down the penstock on Tyee Lake. Just for the audiences, that penstock's about 8,200 plus or minus feet long, and to run an ROV down that remote operated vehicle, all that length, if you can imagine, we're going down 1.5 miles. We will, and the idea is to put it down and to take video 360 degrees all the way around, clear to the bottom. The reason for doing this is threefold. One was that it's been in place for about 33, and Robert can help me out here, about 33 years plus or minus. And it's not been done before. There's 3 fault zones in that penstock, and there is a rock pit at the bottom. The concerns of the engineers is what does that look like inside of there, and is that rock pit filled up? If it is, or if something like that is, and we lose that power, in other words, rocks go into that turbine or so forth, and we or block it up, we lose that power, we're out, we're on diesel. And so we authorized that. What's the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is that that thing gets hung up down there, and that whole penstock has to be dewatered, meaning that you have to shut the valve down. And it isn't just like taking a tap; it's like shutting it off over a number of days. And we'd be on diesel generator for half a dozen days, but then we might have to take somebody and turn them upside down and put them down there to take it loose. And I'm being a little bit facetious here, but we'd have to put somebody down there to take it out back out. But at any rate, I think it's a lot better to do this than it is to wait to see if something happens later on where we might be on diesel for a year or more before we can go back on to the hydropower. The second item I want to talk specifically about is there are two bills. Actually, it's not two bills. There's one bill and the current initiative, the Stand for Salmon initiative that are out there. Both of those from a hydropower perspective are really causes problems. And I'm going to talk now also to our own hydropower here in Petersburg, since we get part of our power from it. Both of those, the Stand for Salmon initiative and it's House Bill 199, it's Louise Stutz out of Kodiak. And both of them have a presumption in there. The presumption is that every piece of water in Alaska, full flow, has salmon until proved otherwise. Each of those bills goes through a process that goes back to the applicant, whether it be new applicants or standing facilities. And it also, in my read of it, also would apply to municipalities. And so you would have to prove that, first of all, salmon were not present, and then second of all, you would have to go back and remedy it in some way if you find them present, which could mean, in the extremes, maybe taking out some part of that hydro. I don't agree with the presumption, and I don't think either bill is real well. The House Bill 199 is the one that really bothers me because it speaks specifically to hydropower in Alaska, and it would catch our hydro facility and would require us to go do all kinds of monitoring. There's a cost associated with it. Each time, and I think it's a 5-year interval or somewhere about that you got to repeat this process, and you have to have a permit, and there's an annual cost to those permits. Of course, the devil's in the details, and the regulations haven't been written, but I think those are two particular pieces of legislation that we really need to watch if we want to maintain our hydropower and what we want to do. The last thing I want to talk about is our own hydro facility. As I've been on now looking at our hydro facility and looking at the engineers and talking with engineers about it, there's a question about whether or not our penstock is large enough to give us the full flow in there. The question that comes up is there's a, see if I can get this down into a little bit more layman's terms. As the water comes down that penstock, there's a roughness coefficient, and the roughness and it's turbulent, and it creates a problem. The question is whether or not if we change that, if we could significantly improve the efficiency of our own hydro. I don't know the answer to the questions I'm posing here, but I really appreciate the manager and Carl's work on putting out an RFQ that has some engineers looking at some of our own facility here. And I think as part of that, there needs to be at least 4 things looked at. I think that this particular item I'm bringing up needs to be looked at. But I think we also need to look at, in that contract, of 4 different items, is replacing what we have in kind on the same footprint. I think we need to look at rebuilding it. And I have a brother that's a hydro engineer, spent 40-some years in the turbine industry. And what he tells me is there's been significant improvements in efficiencies. If that be the case, would we be better off actually changing the footprint and putting in a different system there? Each of those items, I think we need to take a look at those as part of that study, and we'll come back and then look at the costs associated with it. What does it gain us, and what do we lose, and what's the long-term cost? Each of them obviously are going to be expensive. And with that, I don't have anything else. I just wanted to bring those to your attention. Please watch those bills, because I think they also affect the municipality's initiative and the bill. Sorry. And I'm open for any questions that somebody might have.
Are there any questions of Mr. Lynn? Well, thank you, Bob, for bringing that up on our...
Actually, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yeah, Eric.
I just had a question about the initiative. Do you know the timeline of that at all? Is there anything pending?
I just looked the other day that the initiative is to go before our state Supreme Court. I think it's April 26th. What the Supreme Court will do with it, I don't know, but I sure wish they'd kill that, because I think it really changes our, our ADF&G is really, I think, geared to look at population, but this, in my mind, changes their whole dynamics and makes them a regulatory agency. I don't think it's, my personal opinion, I don't think it's quite the right way to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think what happened there, Eric, if I can pipe in on that, or that initiative, was they got the amount of signatures. The Lieutenant Governor didn't find it adequate to be on the ballot. Superior Court, agreed, so the state appealed it, and now it's in Supreme Court. So then we're waiting for that answer. But Bob, that was one of the things that Steve and I talked about when you decided to ask SEPA to get involved in this process with our hydro out here, was to do the evaluation of the facility and then give us reports back on what upgrades we could have. So hopefully it's a win-win for us. Anyway, now it's Cindy from Southeast Conference Mid-Session Summit Report.
I'm going to move this back. I'm Cindy Logdakis. Recently, I attended Southeast Conference Mid-Session Summit as the Borough representative. Presentations included those from both of Alaska's senators, the University of Alaska, Alaska Power Association, the Nature Conservancy, Sea Alaska Heritage Institute, the Alaska Miners Association, the Forest Service, fisheries and mariculture representatives, and representatives of the tourism industry, among others. The most notable outcome of the meeting was the presentation of the Alaska Marine Highway Reform Project to the legislature, which Dave Kensiger will describe in more detail a bit later. I did attend the hearing and felt the committee did an excellent job with their presentation. Legislative representatives asked many good questions and seemed genuinely interested in the ideas and the information shared. The AMHS project rollout was a bright note in what has seemed to be a steady rain of bad news about Alaska's economy. Indeed, we lost 5,000 people statewide to outmigration this past year. The region as a whole has lost 700 state jobs alone, resulting in a $42 million income loss regionally, equivalent to almost 13%. Still, there are some positives. Of all sectors, the visitor industry reported the strongest outlook for next year, with an anticipated 7% expansion anticipated. In particular, Juneau cruise visitations are projected to increase with the arrival of the new 5,000 passenger vessels. This isn't just a boon for Juneau. Neighboring communities will do well to anticipate and prepare for a possible shift in destinations by smaller cruise lines as they seek to accommodate clientele wanting a more personalized and unique experience. Opportunities for industry innovation in maritime-related industries were also highlighted as part of the conference. With more fishing permits per capita than any other state, there are opportunities for vessel building and customization unique to Alaska conditions. By blending construction with servicing, it is possible for industry to create year-round employment. Other marine-related efforts championed by Southeast Conference are expanding as well. 15 new aquatic farms are coming online this year, including oyster and kelp farming. On the educational front, the University of Alaska Southeast now has a Bachelor of Science in Fisheries program located in Juneau and a new U.S. Coast Guard career track opportunity with free tuition for upper-class students. Workforce training is becoming a real focus area for entities within Alaska.
Another new economic focused area being proposed by Southeast Conference is arts and culture. As one aspect of this, the Alaska Heritage Institute is seeking to collaborate on a regional Native Arts Center to train artists and promote artists living in the outlying areas, with the goal of strengthening and promoting the region's arts economy. Along with support for various initiatives and focus areas, Southeast Conference takes positions on issues through resolutions in working towards strengthening our regional economy. One such issue is the EPA rule promulgated for designation of Tier 3 wilderness waters in Alaska. The concerns that the regulations will be overly restricted for development, that standards for lowering water quality aren't well defined, and common non-point discharges not currently regulated under state and federal permit would now be subject to the Tier 3 program. Southeast Conference has discussed taking a position against the rule promulgated by the EPA under the Clean Water Act in favor of having the Alaska State Legislature as the designating authority for nominating water bodies to Tier 3 status. A second resolution regarding the Stand for Salmon ballot initiative was also brought before the board. However, the initial language did not adequately reflect the value of our regional fishing economy and effectively pitted fishing against mining by supporting the Stand for Alaska campaign. Several members asked for a rewrite, and the Stand for Alaska language was eliminated. Southeast Conference feels the Stand for Salmon ballot initiative is not the best method for addressing changes in regulatory language and would prove to be overly restrictive and costly. At the same time, the draft resolution states strong support for protection of fish habitat and fisheries resources in Southeast. A letter thanking Senator Murkowski for her efforts for work on the rescission of the 2016 Tongass Transition Plan and exemption of the national forests in Alaska from the 2001 roadless rule will probably move forward, but it was noted that the Petersburg Assembly voted down Resolution 2018-01 in support of that effort. The biggest elephant in the room, of course, is the failure of the legislature to agree upon a budget. Commissioner Mike Navarre of DCCED noted at the conference that despite budget cuts, job cuts, and service cuts, compromise on budget issues still eludes us and will be a big disincentive to businesses investing in Alaska. We are now facing stiff competition from lower 48 operations. During the two-day conference, there were a number of other topics included as part of the summit that I have not covered here. Biomass projects are moving forward, renewable energy grants were discussed, as were improving communications infrastructure across the state. Healthcare concerns were raised, as were timber issues. If you are interested in learning more, I suggest visiting the Southeast Conference website at www.seconference.org, and in particular, take a look at the publication called Southeast by the Numbers for a regional overview of our economic sectors and trends. Southeast Conference has 8 committees at present. They are comprised of transportation, energy, marine industry/seafood, visitor industry, timber, mining, economic development, and solid waste. The Assembly is encouraged to bring forward any issues of importance for which Southeast Conference can provide advocacy, events, and issue tracking.
Thank you. Any questions of Cindy? Thank you, Cindy. Okay, Mr. Kinsinger, I believe that you're up. Come on.
Thanks, Dave Kinsinger, and I'm going to address you about the ongoing Alaska Marine Highway Reform Project. I'd just like to note that in February, we actually had a weekend where there was absolutely no ferries running in Southeast Alaska. And according to my investigation, that's the first time that's happened since 1963. So I really don't think I need to say anymore. Anybody that's tried to hop on a ferry or has actually succeeded in getting on a ferry recently will understand the situation. The reform project started over 2 years ago. It was sponsored by Southeast Alaska, but it's really not a Southeast Conference project. It's actually a statewide project. It has wide support in all regions of the state, particularly those that receive marine transportation. And as a result of that, the governor, lieutenant governor, and the commissioner have been extremely supportive of this process all along. We hired consultants, and they analyzed systems around the world. How does everybody else do it? Are we different, or are we doing it right? And basically, we found out we're very unique, and we also found out that the way we approach it is probably not the best way. So basically, to cut to the chase, as a result of this study, we came up with a model of how we want to reform the marine highway system. The problem was identified was that the marine highway is locked into a political cycle. Every time you get a new governor, every time you get a new commissioner, every time they change the name or the title of the person that runs the marine highway system, usually what happens is what the previous person did before goes away and you start at ground zero again. The only problem is it takes up to 10 years to construct vessels. So what's been determined by this study is that the best way to operate the marine highway system is to try and insulate it somewhat from the political cycle. In other words, establish a board, establish what's called a public corporation. This does not mean it's privatizing the marine highway system. That's the farthest thing that anybody intends, because the marine highway system will always require, like any public transportation, a substantial amount of public money to work. So how this would work would be as a 7-member board. This board would essentially set policy, set the budget, and as a result of that, it would still be subject to legislative approval and oversight because they're the ones that would be appropriating the money. The model is somewhat modeled after the Railroad Corporation, but not really. A lot of the enabling language is similar to that, but that's just a template for it. So where it sits right now is it's sitting, we've just introduced legislation. House Transportation is going to take it up. We're hoping the same in the Senate side. And unlikely that this major piece of legislation will pass this session. Our hope is that it will, we're just introducing it. We're trying to get people familiar with it. It's a big change. There's a lot of moving parts when you start talking about the marine highway system and how it interacts with other parts in state government. That said, it's an ongoing process. It's been supported by literally every community in Southeast Alaska, Southwest Alaska. If you want to see a list of the benefactors of this, or if you have any other questions or want to find out more information than you probably ever want to know about the marine highway system, just Google AMHS reform, and it'll take you to the project and all the reports that have been generated over the last 2 years. And with that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Kinsinger? Member Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Dave, so if this public corporation was to pass, where does the money come from to support this corporation?
Same place it comes right now.
Okay.
Right now, the majority of the money comes through general funds.
Yep.
That's the money that's used to actually operate the vessels.
Yep.
And the money that comes to build the vessels comes from the federal government, usually with a 90-10 match.
Yep.
And that wouldn't change.
Okay, so with the public corporation, will the corporation be the lobbying arm of trying to generate the money from the legislature?
Well, that's a good question. It wouldn't be any different than it is right now. Right now, the state doesn't have a lobbying arm. I mean, basically, the people that are up there trying to get money for the marine highway system are guys like me that use the system. Southeast Conference, in particular, SWAMC, the organization for Southwest Alaska. The individual communities that are relying upon the service. I assume those will still be the same advocacy groups that will be continuing to lobby the legislature for the money. The idea is with a board like this is you can have continuity in decision making. In other words, a board would not undo necessarily the decisions that were made 6 months before. So that's the concept. And it would be different than the previous project, the Marine Transportation Board. Smaller board, not as much tribalism involved in it, where you had designated seats, designated person, okay, I represent this area, I represent this area. Then the other thing that this is trying to do is also trying to work on the labor issue. Because the marine highway system, the biggest cost of the system is labor. And so if you don't have the labor, the people that run the system, that work for the system, sitting at the table, making the decisions at the front end instead of at the back end of the process, it's going to work a lot better for everybody involved. The people that work with the system and ultimately, hopefully, for the customers of the system. That's the concept. But as you guys know, sometimes concepts don't always work that way.
Just one more question, Dave. So will the public corporation be negotiating with the unions?
Yes. That's one of the main changes right now. It's very convoluted. The marine highway system does not negotiate with the unions right now. Right now it's a different agency in the state government that does the actual negotiating. And so one of the recommendations is that even if this legislation doesn't pass, is that the marine highway system should take over the direct negotiations with the labor unions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other questions of Mr. Kinzinger? Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, thank
you. Great. Hopefully we have more blue boats traveling around. To go through a couple more items on the agenda, then we'll take a short break. But there's no item. There is one item on the consent agenda, and it's a liquor license renewal for the Beachcomber Inn. I would entertain a motion to approve the item that's on the consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
Okay. Not sure who made the motion, but it's second by Member Castro. And any discussion on this? Or we'll just vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, report of other officers. Why don't we take a 5-minute break before we get to the mayor's report? So, okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. All the assembly members we're going to call the meeting back to order. Thank you. Okay, it's time for the mayor's report. First thing I'd like to do before I get started, I would like to wish our condolences to the Mike Bangs family and his many close friends. He will be missed. There's a few other things on the mayor's report, but I'll go through bear with me here. First on it, as listed here, is my report from the Alaska Municipal League Conference, but I'll start off with saying we're seeking letters of interest. The Petersburg Borough is seeking letters of interest from qualified borough residents to serve our community by filling one vacant seat on the Public Safety Advisory Board until October 28th, or October of 2018 municipal election. In addition, there's a Historic Preservation Committee that has 2 vacant seats, one for an archaeologist or at-large member with a term ending 12/31/2020, and one for an assembly member representative with a term ending 12/31/2019. Letters of interest may be submitted to the borough clerk via email or via mail to Box 329, Petersburg, Alaska, or email to D. Thompson at petersburgak.gov, or delivering them here to the office in person. Another thing we need to talk about is attendance at the next few meetings, or the coming up meetings. I will be here, I believe the next meeting is March 5th. I will be here for that. It's up in the air whether I'll be here for the meeting on the 19th. So, and then I won't be back until probably the end of the first week in April. So I don't know what the attendance plans are for other assembly members, but just so the clerk has a heads up, maybe, I remember Merle said he won't be here on the 20th?
And possibly I won't be here the 5th, but I might be able to call in.
I will be calling in on the 5th because I will be out of town. And I'm with you on the 19th. I might be over in Sitka.
Okay, so Debbie, you're kind of making notes there. So if no one else is going to be absent, planned absences, at least we should have a quorum in town still. And
I won't be here on the 19th.
Thank
I
you.
won't be calling in either. I'm traveling.
Okay, not here, no call.
And Debbie, I should be, well, I might be able to call in on the 19th. It just depends on what the hearing are doing.
Okay.
So, same scenario as last year. Okay, now will everybody else be here? Kurt?
I'll also try to call in on the 19th if we have a quorum.
Okay.
We won't if we're all four gone.
Oh.
Wow.
You'll be gone too.
My wife is ruled by a hearing this time of the year, so when Castro leaves, I leave.
Okay, so we might not have a quorum for the second meeting in March, it's appearing like.
Yes.
So, plan accordingly, I guess. Okay, we talked earlier today about the DNR letter. We got that message through Liz that was brought to our attention that the state was going to plan on putting some of the land we were going to select into timber sales in the next 5 years. So when I was in Juneau, I met with the governor and the lieutenant governor, and Barbara Blake was in the room as well, and our lobbyist, Ray Matiszowski, was there, and we brought it to their attention what the plan was, and we opposed it, and we asked them if they'd put a stop to it. And we'll see what happens with that. But we also talked with Senator Stedman on this issue, and Jonathan Christ-Tompkins. JKT and Burt have both been active in trying to get an answer from DNR, and it sounds like Liz has been in correspondence with them as well. So hopefully with our letter and a little bit of visiting I did up there, we can at least make the point that we don't think it's such a good idea. One other thing I talked to the governor and the representatives in Juneau about was dredge spoils. And we're trying to figure out why we have to follow Columbia River standards in Alaska, and it makes it way more expensive to do dredging and place the spoils in like dikes or bulkheads or whatever, so like we did back when we started to fill behind the community coal storage. So maybe we'll figure out who that responsibility belongs to. Some say it's the Corps. The Corps, when I was in D.C., said no, it's EPA, so we're looking into it. Both of our lobbyists are working on that as well. Senator Murkowski and Congressman Young were in Juneau. They gave great presentations. I talked to Chad Padgett from Congressman Young's office. He approached me and he was saying that just like the two senators, there is a plan, but the ink hasn't dried yet on backfilling the Anacapa presence in Petersburg in 2022. So it's on all of their radars. Hopefully that we get some traction on that. One thing that was discussed was the PERS liability going from 22% raising, going up. The bills to keep an eye on there are House Bill 83 and 306 and Senate Bill 212. Like I mentioned today at the Borough Business, APOC now, Alaska Political Offices Commission, they were talking about any municipality over 1,000 population, if you're running for office, if you're a candidate, you're going to have to pay $50 to file. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Another way to make money, I guess, and then something to do with bill statewide for opposing plastic shopping bags. We'll see how that goes. Both Congressman Young and Senator Murkowski mentioned that if we have infrastructure plans or highway plans, to get them to their office because of the infrastructure bill they're talking about going through Congress, just so we have, and I think we've done that already with a list, so I'm just reiterating that, I guess. There's a few other things, but since we're running, those are the most pertinent ones, I think, so I'll wrap up my mayor's report. Steve, time for the manager's report, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Federal Signal should be in town mid-March to install the 2 new sirens and the controller for the existing siren. The Local Emergency Planning Committee and the May Engineering will be holding an open meeting on March 1st at noon for comments regarding the hazard mitigation plan rewrite. The plan is posted on the website. I want to thank thank Sandy for some of the classes she has done for our employees. She taught a first aid, CPR, and AED course to Public Works and a CPR AED class to the municipal building employees. The fire department is sponsoring survival skills for the first responder training on March 3rd. This training is open to all fire department members and police department employees. The Borough is conducting an informal survey as part of the police chief recruitment. Surveys are available at the municipal building front counter if anyone's interested. The public hearings on the development code revision are continuing. This code regulates land use, subdivision, and development within the borough, particularly in Service Area 1. Information about the proposed changes and how to participate in the process can be found on the borough website under Petersburg Development Code Revision. Hard copy of the proposal is available at the public library and the municipal building. The next Planning Commission meeting is a public hearing and recommendations to the Assembly on March 6th at noon. The Borough Assembly will consider the proposal on April 2nd, the 16th, and May 7th. Lots of snow and ice, if folks haven't noticed. Public Works staff is keeping the roads clear and spreading sand and trying to catch up on moving stockpiles of snow to snow dumps as time allows. We actually are in danger of running out of sand and authorized another 300 tons to see if hopefully that'll get us through to warmer weather. Sanitation is hoping to bring a CDL road examiner to town in March to complete testing of our newest sanitation operator, David Plagans. As the DMV's funding has been cut for remote road examinations, the borough is paying to bring the examiner to town and offsetting some of those costs by offering the testing to others in the community that may need it. If you're interested, please contact Public Works to get on the list. The Power and Light remodel project continues to progress. The contractor has completed the interior sheetrock work and painting. Flooring installation is in progress right now, and the second floor suspended ceiling will go in after the flooring is complete. Electrical trim work will be ongoing, still on schedule for substantial completion by April 1st. The 350 generator project should be wrapping up soon. The vendor of this generator is honoring their warranty and has shipped the parts to correct the problems with the generator and engine coupling and the cracked oil pan. All parts should be in Petersburg and ready for install on March 5th. 2 technicians from Pacific Power Group will be flying to Petersburg on March 4th to start the installation the next day. Once the parts are installed, electrical power systems will return in to complete all testing and commissioning with the Pacific Power technicians and the Power and Life staff. The plan is to have the unit in service by March 10th. Sheehan applied for and received a $3,000 grant from First Bank toward our assisted living kitchen project. Big thank you to First Bank and Sheehan. We also received a grant from the Elks Lodge for $1,500 towards the same project, and thanks to Chandra for help on the application and the Elks Lodge for the grant. Parks and Rec is currently planning programs and involved in some of the upcoming festivals. They include the community event nights. This has been happening since January. They are on Saturday evenings, typically planned for the second Saturday of the month. The next one will be Saturday, April 14th for a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. We have a new swim lesson session that starts on March 23rd. We do have spring break scheduled for the 12th through the 16th of March. We had planned on offering a midday open swim, but we're low on staff and not sure if we can make that happen. Chandler's working on trying to see if we can round up some lifeguards. Saturday, the 24th of March, we have Scoop the Poop Day at Sandy Beach, so anybody wanting to be involved in that, we appreciate any help. The Little Norway Festival meetings have started. The next meeting will be held at March 8th at 12 p.m. at the Chamber Conference Room. Anyone who's interested in helping is welcome to join us. The HVAC coils for the Aquatic Center are here and have been partially installed. We are waiting one more piece before they will be fully up and running again. Lorianne participated in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Master's Class panel concerning issues that face the U.S. shallow draft harbors and a partnership with the Army Corps with coastal communities. Harbor staff has been concentrating on snow removal and staying ahead of problems associated with the heavy loads. Just a general reminder to the community to keep your vessels and fingers shoveled off and watch for things like frozen scuppers that can lead to a vessel sinking when the weather warms. Big thank you to the U.S. Coast Guard team for a successful week of exams prior to the Tanner Crab opening. And the harbor staff is getting close to releasing the 2018 summer tour ship schedule. As the schedule stands, we expect 128 stops, up from 108 stops last year, and getting closer to the top year of 152 stops in 2008. Congratulations to Serena Newman. She's back from the Municipal Corrections Officer Certification Training and represented us very well during the course. Thank you, Serena, for going, and very good work. The Alaska Police Standards Council completed the final action to revoke Camp Preston's police officer certification at their February 13th meeting. They also took other actions, anything involving Petersburg. Chairman Swihart recused himself during the voting. Their next meeting is in May. First Bank Grant also awarded the library with a $3,000 grant for the 2018 Summer Reading Challenge. This is the 9th year that First Bank has made a major contribution to the program. We also received a $2,500 donation from Uncruise that will be used for library youth programs. Library just launched a new early literacy program, which is Read 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten, sponsored by the Friends of Petersburg Libraries. And last, property assessment notices were mailed on February 28th. A reevaluation was done by the assessor on land between Haugen Drive and the cemetery, as well as on Frederick Point. Again, those will be going out on the 28th. The appeal process only lasts for 30 days, ending on March 30th, so be sure to review your assessment when you receive it in the mail.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Manager. Any questions? Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Steve, have we heard back from DNR in response to the letter that we sent them about the tidelands at Papke's at all?
No, we have not.
Is the survey regarding the police chief recruitment, is that available online?
No, not at the moment. I can make it available online.
How many pages is it?
1.
Oh, how long will it be available?
Originally put it out there, I was hoping to finish it up by the last week, but we have not gotten a lot of responses, so I'm holding off. I wanted to hold off running ads until I got some information back from the community, so I'm probably going to wait at least another couple of weeks.
Okay. And then my last question, Mr. Mayor, what does the Municipal Corrections Officer do? What is that?
Those are our dispatchers, also double as corrections officers. Chief Swihart would be a better person to go into their individual duties. But
basically, they supervise the inmates that we're holding in the community jail. There's a certification process that they go through to make sure they're up to speed on those duties, and they take care of the prisoners.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other questions of the manager on his report? Okay, we'll move on to unfinished business. We have 2 ordinances for third and final reading. The first ordinance is an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, Section 4.28.130, Senior Citizen Exemption, to authorize collection of an application fee in order to cover the administrative cost of processing, issuing, and monitoring of senior citizen sales tax exemption cards. I'd entertain a motion to approve this ordinance in its third and final reading.
So move.
Second. Motion been made by Member Strand, seconded by, was that Member Mucci? Okay, discussion. Member Mucci.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to amend this fee, and I don't know if we need me to make a motion do you want the motion now, or what's the best time?
If you want to amend the motion,
yes.
You need to make a motion to amend it right now and then state your amendment, and then
so
I'd like a second.
Okay. So I'd like to amend this senior citizen fee, tax exemption card fee, from $100 to $60.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, a motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Morrell to amend Ordinance 2018-01 as presented and change the fee from $100 to $60.
Yes.
Okay, is there discussion? Member Strand.
The reason I
amended it last time to $100 is because we're doing it every year so we can weed out people who are no longer eligible. And each year, we're going to have to go through this if the cost goes up, unless we charge it, unless we put the amount in there. That gives us room to grow for future production costs. But there will be people who have a card now that are no longer eligible because they've spent too much time away.
We'll cross that bridge when we get to that. So, Member Beachy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, my original intent was not to make people pay more than what it was cost the city or the borough to do. And $60 is what I've been told it costs to produce the card and staff time, and that's why I made the motion to go back to 60. I know it might cost more in the future, but we're dealing with something right now.
Okay, Member Morrell?
I agree with Jeff. I think that, and like Marge said, that if we are going to do something that costs more than the actual card itself, we need to maybe be a little bit more clear on what we're doing and label it differently.
Any other discussion on the amendment to change the fee from $100 back down to $60? Member Walhitter?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to vote no on this, and I'm going to tell you why I'm going to vote no on this, because I think we're going the wrong direction. I think we're taking one big leap ahead of what the original intent of this ordinance was. And my intentions is to boil it down to what the original intention of this original ordinance was. And there'll be a lot of people that won't be eligible at that time, so there won't be a need for a fee. So anyway, that's the reason I'm going to vote no on this.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment to change the fee from $100 to $60?
Mr. Mayor.
Member Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So do we have to get some clarification on what a household or a homeowner is?
Let's cross this bridge, and then we'll have other debate. So is there any other discussion on the amendment? Clerk, call the roll on the amendment. Eric, did you ever?
Yeah, just real quick.
Sure.
I initially like the $100. I think it is a great alternate source of revenue. However, just like Marge brought up and Member Morrow pointed out, and asking for more than the fee of what the card actually costs to implement, perhaps is something different than what we were initially intending. But yet, I'm encouraged by this because this is a discussion kind of covering this topic about senior sales tax exemption in general. So regardless of the end-up cost, be it $60 or $100 for the card itself, at least we can be assured that low-income individuals will not have to pay that.
Okay, any other discussion on the amendment? Clerk, call the roll on the amendment.
Jay?
No.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Eric?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
No.
Nancy?
No.
Okay, so the amendment to change the fee from $100 to $60 fails with a 4-3 vote, if I had the numbers right. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I can't recall who voted how, so I'm not even going to pretend I'm going to keep track of that tonight. So we're back to the main motion as amended. It still has a $100 fee associated with it. Any discussion on the main motion as it stands? Member Strand.
Just to clarify, there's somewhere in here that says the income limit is $20,000.
I believe so.
Correct.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So do we need to clarify what a homeowner is or a household is?
A household right now, Jody, can you give us one more
Right now, there
definition?
isn't a definition in the code for household. On the Medicaid website, it does define household as tax filer plus spouse plus tax dependent equals a household. So you could make a motion to add a definition of household into the code stating that, and that would take care of any roommates. So if Marge said that she might have considering a roommate, so that income would not be included in her total. if that's something you wanted to
I have a
do.
question for Jody,
Member
too, or
Strand.
somebody.
Yeah.
Do we need to define roommate?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think roommate is in the code anywhere, so.
Well, is that different than partner?
Let's not get into a dialogue back and forth between people in the audience and the assembly members, please. It gets confusing enough as it is. So, is there any other amendments to the main motion? Member Mucci.
I'm just trying to sort out if we need to specify what a homeowner is. That's what I'm trying to
What a household.
A household, whatever.
Right, so-
I want to know if we need to have it in this ordinance.
Without talking to an attorney, I couldn't answer that question. Member Stan Gregor.
I don't even know who I'm asking this one. Steve, I guess, if I may. So, for the sake of argument, would it be possible to amend this just to add that language in there as defined by Finance Director Tao? You know, was that the Medicaid definition of household you gave?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And I think, to answer one of the earlier questions, yes, I believe it should be in there. I believe there should be a definition of household.
Okay. Roger that. In that case, I would amend this ordinance to include the household definition as outlined by Member Tao regarding the Medicaid definition thereof. Does that work, Clerk Thompson?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Jody, can you give us the definition one more time, what Medicaid calls it?
Yes, tax filer plus spouse plus tax dependents equals household.
Okay, so does that meet everybody's, what do you call it?
We've defined household?
You have, right. So anyway, on this, there's been an amendment made to define household as to follow the Medicaid wording. So is there any other discussion on that? Clerk, call the roll on that amendment.
Randy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Okay, we have an amendment that passed on ordinance 2018-01 to add that definition for household. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. Is there any other discussion on the main motion? Okay, clerk, call the roll.
Mark?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Randy?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
No.
Okay, ordinance 2018-01 passes in its third and final reading with member Walhuter, Marole, and Jensen opposing. And now that brings us to the third reading of ordinance 2018-02, an ordinance adopting a new Petersburg Municipal Code chapter. Are we done? Thank you. Okay, we'll start over. Second reading on ordinance, third reading and final reading on 2018-02, an ordinance adopting a new Petersburg Municipal Code, Chapter 4.80, to impose a marine passenger infrastructure fee in order to address the costs incurred by the Borough for services and infrastructure rendered to cruise ships and cruise ship passengers visiting the Borough. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its third reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Mucci to adopt ordinance 2018-02. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Member Strand? And
I'd like to amend this to return the definition back to marine passenger from infrastructure fee.
okay, is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion's been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Castro to change the wording back from, take the word infrastructure out and put a passenger fee. So it'll be a marine passenger fee, not an infrastructure fee. Any discussion on that amendment? Sure. Member Castro?
Yeah, I mean, I was the one who had made the initial amendment to be able to add the term infrastructure and replace it with, or to replace passenger with infrastructure. After we received a letter from our attorney, she made a good point mentioning how the term infrastructure only refers to physical structures and that we shouldn't probably limit the way we can spend money on so severely. So, for example, we might be able to use the marine passenger fee to be able to fund training of personnel, an activities director, any type of part-time position, and many things that aren't a physical building. So I think in the effort to be able to give ourselves the flexibility we want to use this for, that removing infrastructure is a good idea.
Okay, is there any more discussion on the amendment? Clerk, call the roll on the amendment.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment to strike the word infrastructure and add the marine passenger fee will be the title of it. That passes with a unanimous vote. Now we're back to the main motion as amended. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to amend this ordinance to add wording subject to the approval by the borough attorney that will prevent double charging or collection of the marine passenger fee twice on any cruise ship that begins and ends in the Petersburg Borough with the same passengers on board.
Second.
Okay, did you get that motion, Debbie?
Yes.
So that's just for the trip if it's within the borough.
Yeah, well, if it's Mr. Mayor, if it starts here and comes back here with those, they're exempt from it, trying to encourage the local part of this.
Right. So there's been an amendment made in a second, so discussion on that, make sure they only get charged one fee.
Kurt over there.
Kurt?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. After going to that meeting or the chamber dinner, Dan brought up some really good points there. He figured that his cruise lines was going to probably invest close to $600 and some thousand into Petersburg, or infuse $600 and some thousand into Petersburg, and at 6% city sales tax, that's $36,000. We're in a unique position right now where we could be the only community in Southeast that doesn't charge a head tax for anybody who wants to home port out of Petersburg. And I think that's something that we need to consider, because they're going to bring that money in here, they're going to spend the night here, the ships are going to be moored here, we're going to make more money on those people than those that do touch and goes. So instead of passing this amendment, we should consider, if they want to home port here, not to charge them any head tax at all, and to let Main Street benefit from the added income that they're going to spend here.
Any other discussion? Member Stanton Gregor?
Sure. Just thinking out loud, looking at the other side of that coin, let's say if we approximately took in, off this marine passenger fee, approximately $30,000 a year, that could be great money to invest in, let's say, new bathrooms, more subtle infrastructure over time that could also contribute to, a ship wanting to home port here, being able to invest that back into our infrastructure for that. I know it's not a ton of money, but we're so limited in exactly what we can use it for. It'd be, I think, a good asset for the cruise industry as well. Food for thought.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we're voting on the amendment to make sure they only get...
Apologies, Mr. Mayor.
They only get charged one marine passenger fee if it originates in the borough and returns here. Any other discussion on that amendment? Clerk, call the roll.
Nancy?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Kurt?
In principle, I like the idea, but no.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment passes with the 6-1 with Member Walhuter opposed. Brings us back to the main motion as amended for the $5 marine passenger fee. Is there any other discussion? So, Member Castro.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of, there are folks who support this, and there are folks who are against this and feel that maybe it could harm the local businesses, taking away the desire to come here because of an increased cost. However, if we are able to use this infrastructure, this money you could use to be able to build up an infrastructure, perhaps it could go some way to be able to build up facilities that the local businesses might be able to appreciate, such as, just like Member Stanton Gregor pointed out, bathrooms. If we had public bathrooms located down near the docks, then we wouldn't have passengers from these cruise ships wandering around town looking for available restrooms. So it's just one idea, and given, it is only $30,000, potentially $30,000 a year, but 3 years later, that could be the investment necessary to be able to build a set of clean latrines.
Okay, any other discussion? Member Walhooter?
I'm just going to reiterate what I said earlier. I think we should encourage people to come here and not discourage them through taxation.
Well, Member Strand?
Perhaps it might be just as encouraging for them to visit if there was a bathroom for them to use.
Okay, let's, Member Walhooter.
Oh, I was just going to say, if Dan is correct in his numbers, and we get 36,000 just out of uncruise, and some of these other cruise ships, come in and decide that they want to start home porting out of here, it's going to take more than $30,000 to build an outhouse. You can't even get a porta potty probably delivered anywhere in town. So, I think that's something that we as a borough will have to look at to build infrastructure through the city sales tax that we're going to, reap from these companies that are going to stay here longer. So, anyway, we can come up with the money. So if we don't collect the head tax, doesn't mean we're not going to get outhouses or nice utilities, for restrooms. So.
Okay, I'm going to re-express my concerns from when this was first brought before us, and I'm concerned about getting mixed up in a lawsuit over this. And it's not because Uncruise kind of touched on not really wanting to pay a $5 marine passenger fee at the chamber dinner on Saturday, or what the letter that was read into the record tonight said. I just am concerned about it not generating enough money. I know that would add up, but I'm just worried about any kind of litigation towards the city. So I will be voting no on this. But is there any other comments? Clerk, call the Member Castro. Do you have one?
I guess I was just reading the end of Rick Erickson's letter here. How he'd like us to be able to focus the language to craft an acceptable dock fee that could assist our harbor infrastructure. So, is the language specific enough to be able to focus it toward cruise ship related or industry appreciated amenities in town?
I haven't. I'd have to.
I know.
Read through the details.
What is the amendment?
We're voting on the main motion as amended now. So if there's no other discussion, will the clerk call the roll? Member
No, I think Eric, Member Castro had a good point, and I just want to make sure that we've looked at that, before we vote on this main motion. Is there an answer to that question, Mr. Mayor?
I was going to ask Finance Director Tao to comment on it if possible.
Sure. So I just want to remind you that during budget time, the Assembly will be deciding, once we actually start collecting this revenue, where it goes. And I would think part of the process is, talking to the cruise ships that have been coming to town and saying, hey, what have you noticed that you really want? And, taking that under consideration and allocating the money that way. We could collect it, maybe we'll save it for a few years, and build it up until you can build something nice. But we're not going to do anything right away. So I hope that answers your question.
And if I remember, we haven't set a year, have we, when we're going to put this on the books? Didn't they say 2020?
It goes into effect January 1st, 2019.
So it won't be for this year's cruise season, it'll be next. Clerk has a comment?
I just wanted to let everyone know that if you want to look at page 28 of your packet, under 4.80.130 in this ordinance, it tells you the use of proceeds that are allowed, just if you want to look before you vote.
So it is specified, spelled out?
It is. You still will decide, but there's guidelines.
Thank you for that clarification. Member Mucci?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, thank you. That's been my intention from the start on this, is to make sure that these funds go towards the visitor industry. If it's Wi-Fi, toilet paper for the public restrooms, a new bathroom at the crane dock, there's a wide list of things, and all those things benefit the visitor industry. And that's my intent with the original ordinance. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Kurt?
No.
Jeff?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance 2018-02 passes in its third and final reading with myself and Member Walhooter opposing. Now that brings us to, hang on a second, ordinances for second readings. And that first one is 2018-04. This is an ordinance amending Chapter 3.08 of the Municipal Code entitled Assembly and Mayor to add agenda formation language and to amend the deadline for submission of items to be included on an agenda. I'd entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2018-04 in its second reading.
So move. Second.
Motion made by Member Walhooter, seconded by Member Castro to adopt ordinance 2018-04. Any discussion? Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Steve, it's the point of clarification from you, and for those listening at home, the series of ordinances we're about to begin reading through right now, all of them are a part of the municipal, or excuse me, the utility director position that you've direction you'd like to take.
Not this one is not. The rest are correct.
Okay. Just want to make sure I was clarifying on that. Thank you.
Now this is Judge. Okay.
I'm going to turn the lights back on for folks. Sorry.
Oh, sure.
Automatic lights turned off.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this ordinance 2018-04? If I could make an amendment, which I can't, I would suggest we. And I don't know if everybody's looked at the information that the clerk got to put this ordinance together from other municipalities. There's a variety. Some of them, the mayor's involved in setting the agenda. Some of them, 2 assembly members have to put something forth. One of them, I can't remember the municipality, even has a meeting with the manager, the clerk, and I don't know how they get away with this, having assembly members there to set the agenda. But, I would like to see it, I'm going to vote no on this if it stays like it is with any assembly member and if the mayor is not involved in setting the agenda. I think the chairman of the meeting should be involved somehow in setting the agenda. It's a pretty common practice. It's been done here in the past for decades, even though it wasn't written that way. Board of Fish meetings are done that way. The chairperson is involved in helping set the agenda. I think it would make it less complicated. So anyway, those are my 2 cents. So any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Nope.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2018-04 passes with a 6-1 vote with Mayor Jensen opposed in its second reading. Uh-oh, wrong button. Now that brings us to the ordinance 2018-05. This is the first of the group of ordinances that has impact on the restructuring of our utility codes. So I'd entertain a motion to adopt 2018-05, and I'll read it. An ordinance amending Chapter 1416 of the Municipal Code entitled Electricity to amend the title of electric utility, to provide for a utility director as head of the electric utility department, and to establish fines for violations of provisions of Chapter 14.16. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this in its second reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Mucci. Discussion. Member Stanton Greger.
I think I'll speak to this one, but it applies to all. I'll be voting for all of these relevant ordinances because more or less this is the borough manager's idea. I think it's a good idea, and in this role I don't want to be micromanaging who he hires and does not hire, so I'll be voting for this string of ordinances.
Member Burrell.
Speaking to the micromanaging is defined as what? Controlling every part, however small, of an enterprise or activity. I don't think that when you have to rewrite 6 ordinances and it's going to affect the whole borough utility, that qualifies as micromanaging. That being said, we all have good ideas and we all have bad ideas. Steve submitted a list that had cost-saving ideas, some of which were not to plow on overtime, only plowing when there's 4 or more inches of snow, and removing all the streetlights. I'm sorry, but I don't want my kids standing out on the side of the street when there's no lights and it's unplowed. So I don't think that every idea that any of us have should not be looked at by all, by us as an assembly. That's why we're here. We all know that I strongly support the Power and Light employees, and I think that is a disservice to them to rely on their expertise, but not to value their opinion.
Member Castro?
You're right. Yeah, Petersburg is fortunate to have such an accomplished crew of linemen, including Scott Newman, to keep Petersburg safe and to fully advise their supervisor, whomever that turns out to be. Bob Larson said that the most important trait of the electrical director is technical expertise. But like Andrew Donato was quoted in the pilot, the most important aspect of the position is quality leadership. And I've spoken with Scott, and he values Carl for his ability to clearly explain himself, grant and contract writing, and other administrative functions necessary of a department head. So I will be voting for this.
Member Strand?
I'll be supporting this as well. People who come here to testify have my admiration, but they aren't the only people who give me their opinions. I hear from people on the phone and on the street, so.
Member Morrell?
Well, speaking of that, have any of you had anybody that's in the electrical trade that 100% support this idea of restructuring?
Are we going to do a debate, or what's going on?
No, I'm asking a question. So I'm just because there's been, I don't know how many people in this field, professionals, speak out against this, and we're going to value just what the manager wants as opposed to what the community wants and all the professionals in the trade. I don't quite understand that.
Any other input? I'm not going to be voting in favor of any of these ordinances that are going to have to do with the restructuring. It's up to each individual assembly member to make their decision on why they're going to vote for certain things. But the reason I'm not going to vote for this, because I don't think it puts the right leadership in a very important position. We had testimony from 8 people tonight on this particular ordinance, and none of them were in favor of it. They all, in my opinion, have a lot of experience in this electrical field. One of them in particular was a mayor, a council member here, helped build this whole infrastructure that we're enjoying now. I'm worried that if we don't have the right expertise in place driving this boat, we're going to end up at some point down the road in trouble. So I will not vote for any of these restructuring ordinances. Member Mucci.
Mr. Mayor, I'm trying to sort out what the trouble is. I mean, what's the trouble that you're speaking of?
Well, this is from my unexperienced opinion. I'm not an electrical person. From what I've been told, from talking with people that are in the industry, one thing that I could see as an issue right now, we have barely enough linemen, if I understand it right, to work hot work. This winter or next summer, whenever the apprentice leaves, we won't be able to do hot work. I don't want my lights going off. If we've, back in the 80s or whenever it was, we used to have blackouts a lot. And I think we forgot about that. Another thing I'm worried about is if this goes through, we have a disgruntled crew, a couple of them leave, that's their decision. And I'm not supporting that or saying, it's a good or bad idea. If they did, how easy is it going to be to recruit someone to come back into this position, into this power and light job with that kind of an environment? So that's another concern. So you ask, I just thought those are a couple things that are top of my mind. Any other discussion? Member Walter.
I haven't weighed in yet. I think this is a great concept in principle. I think we needed to have probably considered this about 3 years ago and brought the people that we thought were going to be, taking over this whole industry, brought alongside, and trained up in what they needed to know so that when they left, we could have had the superintendent who was in charge at the time give us all the thumbs up and say, these guys are ready, they should take over. We didn't get that. And so again, in my mind, we've taken one big leap ahead of ourselves, and this is why I'm not going to be voting for this.
Any other discussion before we vote on this ordinance? Clerk, call the roll.
Nancy?
Yes.
Brandy?
No.
Eric,
Yes.
Kurt,
Nope.
Jay,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
No. Okay, the ordinance 2018-05 passes in its second reading with a 4-3 vote, with members Walhooter, Marole, and Mayor Jensen opposed. That brings us to the next ordinance, ordinance 2018-05, an ordinance amending Chapter 14.16 of the Municipal Code entitled Electricity to amend the title to electric utility, to provide for a utility director as head of the electric utility department, and to establish fines for violations of provisions
Mr.
Chapter
Mayor?
14.16.
That's what we just voted on. We
let's
need to go
vote
down
on it
to
again.
06.
Maybe people changed their mind.
Sorry.
Okay. Ordinance 2018-06, an ordinance, this is for second reading, amending Chapter 1404 of the Municipal Code entitled Water, to amend the title of to water utility, to provide for a utility director as head of the water utility department, and to establish fines for violations of provisions of Chapter 1404. Entertain a motion to approve this in its second reading.
So move.
Second. Motion been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Mucci, to adopt Resolution 2018-06. Any discussion? Clerk call the roll.
Mark,
No.
Jay,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Nope.
Brandy.
Nope.
Thank you.
Okay. Ordinance 2018-06 passes in its second reading with Marole, Walhooter, and Mayor Jensen opposed. Ordinance 2018-07, an ordinance amending Chapter 14.08 of the Municipal Code entitled Sewer, to amend the title to Sewer Utility, to provide for a utility director as head of the Sewer Utility Department, and to establish fines for violations of provisions of Chapter 1408. Entertain a motion to approve in
So
its
moved.
second reading.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Stanton Greger, seconded by Member Strand, I believe, to adopt ordinance 2018-07 in its second reading. Discussion? Clerk call the roll.
Mark,
No.
Jay,
Yes.
Brandy,
Nope.
Jeff,
Yes.
Eric,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt.
Nope.
Thank you.
Okay, that ordinance as well passes with a 4-3 vote, with the same three dissenting. Ordinance 2018-08, an ordinance providing for Chapter 3.76 of the Municipal Code entitled Administrative Officers and Appeals Process, updating current language to reflect borough incorporation. I'll entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 2018-08 in its second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Stanton Greger, seconded by Member Strand, to adopt ordinance 2018-08 in its second reading. Any discussion? Clerk call the roll.
Jeff,
Yes.
Mark,
No.
Brandy,
Nope.
Nancy,
Yes.
Kurt,
Nope.
Eric,
Yes.
Jay,
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2018-08 passes in its second reading with a 4-3 vote, with Member Marole, Walhooter, and Mayor Jensen opposed. Brings us to ordinance 2018-09, an ordinance amending Chapter 3.38 of the Municipal Code entitled Public Works Department, to remove operations responsibilities for the water utility and sewer utility from the Public Works Director duties. Entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its second reading.
So move.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Strand, seconded by Member Stanton Greger, to approve ordinance, adopt ordinance 2018-09 in its second reading. Any discussion? Clerk call the roll.
Nancy,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Kurt,
Nope.
Mark,
No.
Brandy,
Nope.
Jay,
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, as well, ordinance 2018-09 passes in its second reading with a 4-3 vote, with the same three dissenting, Mayor Jensen, Member Marole, and Member Walhooter. Ordinance 2018-10, an ordinance amending Chapter 3.40 of the Municipal Code entitled Electric Utility, to amend the title to Electric Utility, Water Utility, and Sewer Utility Departments, and to provide for the three utilities to the operation responsibility of the utility director. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Castro, I believe, and seconded by Member Strand to adopt ordinance 2018-10 in its second reading. Discussion? I'm going to put my input in one more time. Listening to everybody that's testified in the assembly chambers for these ordinances on this restructuring, it's been a majority of them not in favor of it. And for many different reasons, and I'm going to say it again, we've had some of the people with the most experience in the electrical field in our community testifying in opposition to this. And that is the reason, one of the reasons I'm not supporting this ordinance. Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Kurt?
Nope.
Jeff?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Brandy?
No.
Jay?
Yes. Okay, ordinance 2018-10 passes with a 4-3 vote with members Morrell, Walhuter, and myself, Mayor Jensen, opposed. And just for the people listening, we have one more reading. The third and final reading will be on March 5th, I believe, and then whatever the next meeting is after that, it sounds like we're not going to have a quorum for the 19th. There will be one more discussion on this if these ordinances pass to move it forward, to give the manager permission to move ahead with this idea. So next thing under new business is proposed Petro 49 Incorporated / Borough Land Trade. I'd entertain a motion to give direction to move forward with this, I guess, is the proper motion. Something in the positive.
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Walhuter. Debbie, can you come up, can you tell us what wording you're going to put down for this?
Yeah, let's see. So, let's see. We'll provide an update on the progress of the proposed land trade. Okay, so I don't know what you guys want to say as a motion.
Okay,
maybe we should let...
You're the maker of the motion. Put the words to it.
Maybe we should let Glow give her...
He's the assembly member.
Okay.
He's making the motion. Let's let him do it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to, I guess the motion would be to direct the city manager to enter into negotiations with the help of the harbor master and Petro Marine for, to negotiate the lease exchange and the property exchange at the Petro warehouse and the Southeast Island Fuel and the warehouse behind it. Second.
Okay, so that is what we're discussing here, is what was brought up to us for the, and it was approved by the Harbor Board, to swap the land with Petro Marine. It used to be the old Union Oil office, tank farm, for Petro Express, the gas station, and Petro's warehouse behind her that houses their tank trucks. And there is something in the agenda here where the harbor master will give a presentation. So why don't we start with that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Assembly. We have included in your packet minutes from the Harbor Board meeting that were supportive of this, as requested to bring back to the Harbor Board to discuss it. I provided you a memo that's 3 pages long of lots of information, and Jody has provided a spreadsheet. So I don't know if you want me to go into much more detail than that. It's just this is something that the Harbor is requesting that the Assembly consider, because we are in desperate need of a location to have a facility that we can maintenance the harbor with, as well as store harbor materials, centrally located. This option, the opportunity has been available to us, and we'd like you to move forward with this or something else. If this gets decided not to move forward with, I'll be back requesting something else. I mean, the present situation, we can't continue on. As most of you have been through and taken a look at the way we operate, it's just not working any longer. We need to have a better facility, bigger facility, and so this is an idea that's been brought before you. And do you want us to move forward on it, or should we come back to you with something else?
Okay, any discussion on this member strand?
I wonder if we need a more recent appraisal than, what was it, 4 years ago?
Do you have how recent is it an appraisal or a tax assessment?
We have available to us tax assessments. That's all I know of.
I believe I got an email today from someone with an old Petro appraisal from 2012 for the land that they own. I would think that you would need something much more recent.
Member Walhuter.
Yeah, I went in and discussed this I talked to Bob at length, and we were talking about comparing apples with apples instead of tax assessments. We were talking about land appraisals. So Bob was going to wait to see, because they were going to go get a land appraisal once they knew that we wanted to at least look into it, So I think what this amendment is right now is getting maybe our approval for them to go into. This doesn't mean this is a done deal, but, just to go into, negotiations so they could go get an appraisal, then we know what our land appraisal is, and then we can go from there. So is that correct, Steve? Or close?
Close. If I may,
yes.
Through the Mayor, the borough currently does not have any way to do a land swap. None of our ordinances allow it. Clerk Thompson has done a great job. She's gotten some examples from several different communities where there is an ordinance in place. By the way, these ordinances tend to be written in a way that it's really vague. Basically, case by case, it allows the Assembly to make conscious decisions with a real loose outline of how it's supposed to happen. I started forwarding one around today just to get people's comments. Jody will need to look at it, Carl, Liz, and then Debbie, and then the attorney. So if the Assembly approves this at this point, then what we will do is finalize an ordinance, bring it back in front of the Assembly that would allow us to do a land swap, and that would give whoever you decide to have the authority to actually do those kind of negotiations and make those kind of decisions or recommendations on whether it's an assessment versus appraisal. Honestly, we're not there yet. In other words, that ordinance has to be written and approved by you and the attorney before we can go too much farther with this.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. But we can do both at the same time. We can start moving the ordinance, and you can start the conversation with Petro.
Correct. I mean, that's up to the Assembly.
Right. I suppose that could be direction given by the Assembly, but my opinion is if you can't come up with an agreeable swap term, then maybe we should have an ordinance on the books so we can swap land. So if this comes up again, but I don't know how many, so maybe that's not a bad idea.
Through the Mayor.
Do you have more?
I'm just sorting it out.
But myself, I'm not in favor with this right now as it's presented. I understand the situation the harbor's in, not having a place to work out of. I think the borough owns land that it could construct something on that would be less of a cost to the borough in the long run. We're looking at losing $30,000 a year in lease and property tax, and we just approved marine passenger fee that's going to bring $30,000 a year and hoping to do that, but this is money we're going to lose, so that offsets that, but that's apples and oranges. But then in here in their proposal, they've got and this is just one of the ideas, there's a 40 by 60 foot building to the cost of $400,000. Do we need a 2,400 square foot maintenance shop? And another thing, if we did swap and took the building as it is, haven't been in the building recently, but I asked when we requested the Harbor Board to vet this and give us back their opinion, and it's unanimous that they want to do this swap, how much is it going to cost if we do this to get that building up to the condition they want it to be in? I mean, they can move into it now, I understand, but it's got a flat roof. Do we need to put a pitched roof on it? What kind of remodeling do we have to do? And I talked to the manager about this a while back, and we were talking, well, maybe we should have someone actually professional assess the condition of the building instead of just someone looking in and say, oh, it's nice. Just some of my concerns. I just thought I'd throw my view on the table. So, Member Walter?
I'm not aware that this actually ties our hands into making the swap with these guys. I think the more information that we have, I think the better off we are. I mean, once Petro steps up and gives us an assessment, and we have our assessment, then we have more tools in the toolbox that we can then look at. Maybe we have better options to look elsewhere. But until we go this route, we're just guessing. So I'll be voting for this.
Yeah, I mean, through the mayor, I have had a informal conversation with Mr. Volk, and Petro just needs direction from us. Do we want to use assessment or appraisal? And I told him what I'll say to you, which is that's going to be up to the Assembly on how that ordinance is written, whether the Assembly chooses to make it appraisal is the vehicle or whether we use our local assessment. So Mr. Volk seemed to be perfectly okay with that. I explained that we'd have to go through an ordinance process. He seemed to be okay with that, that it would take some time. And so I think if the Assembly chooses to go that way, we can get an ordinance in front of you fairly quickly, and we'll go from there.
Ritchie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've all had an opportunity to go through what they have for storing the harbor equipment, and it's quite frankly, it's substandard. I mean, all the hinges and you could probably push a hand through the doors at some of the storage units. I mean, those guys need a place to work. Here's a building that is available. It's not an astronomical amount of money. We have a willing partner with Petro, who seems to me that they're bending over backwards to kind of make this thing go. The addition of the Dolphin at the south end of the Petro dock that Petro is agreeing to help us with, that's a big deal. I mean, we're seeing so much pressure in the city or the borough for use of that drive-down dock that those guys are just at us all the time about more space, and unless we're going to go out and build another harbor, if we can work with a local business in town to put a Dolphin out there in the next couple of years, that's going to take some of the pressure off that drive-down dock, because that drive-down dock, they're all clamoring to use it, and you know how it is in the spring and summer. That's a busy place, and I will be voting for this.
Member Stanton Gregor, and then Member Strand. Member Strand, you go first. Yeah.
I want to make sure we're going for an appraisal, not an assessment, and need clarification on the $30,000 lease payment. Doesn't that go in the harbor fund, or does that go in the general fund?
It goes in the harbor fund.
Can you answer that? It does go in the harbor fund.
28.5.
Yeah.
Was that all, Member Strand?
Yes.
Okay. My 2 cents in brief is I think it's a win-win. I think it's really good for Petro, and I think it's really great for the harbor. Bob Martin spoke well to the topic. Member Wallen's memo is pretty explanatory, as well as the minutes from the harbor board meeting. I think it's rare when you get a win-win like this from both public and private partnership, and this one seems to fit that bill pretty well, so I'll definitely be voting for this.
Any other discussion? So the motion is to move forward with negotiations and to start drafting an ordinance. That wasn't in the motion, but we could just have an ordinance at the next reading to start. If that's possible. Member Morrell?
At that point, will we actually have more of an idea of what the building will need to get it to the standards that you guys want to use in it?
Yeah, we can move in right now, and I think, if you've gone through a tour of it, you've seen that it's in pretty good shape. We'd probably have to add some heating to it, but that's about it to initially start using it. So, I don't know that there's all that much to improve upon it.
One other thing that I've thought of and I've considered in this, why I'm not going to support this, if a private enterprise comes along, the borough having land right now that it could construct a brand new building, and you've got a 50-year lifespan on it. Life expectancy before you have to start doing maintenance. We're going to get into a building that needs some kind of maintenance and renovation right off the bat. The new building might cost more, but when you look at the number that was given to us of AML last week, we don't put away money for depreciation, but you're looking at 3 to 6% annually, so you add that into your business plan, what you should be putting away to keep the O&M up on your buildings. If there was a private enterprise that came along and wanted to buy that building and turn it into a lumber yard or some other kind of a, fishing supply store, we're taking that ability away. It hasn't been bought yet, so maybe that's not going to happen. That's just some of my thoughts. So, Member Walter.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that just because I'm in favor of this ordinance to, come up with the land swap ordinance, does not necessarily mean that it's a slam dunk for the Petro Marine building. We need to have more information. I'm not going to jump ahead. Let's get this ball rolling. Let's see what the appraisals are, and then we'll make that decision when we get there. So this is why I'm going to be voting for it.
Okay. Is there any more discussion? Member Castro.
Yeah, as far as appraisals are concerned, we might be able to even go further and try to actually get a full-on inspection, and that way, by structural engineers or something, just to be able to allay some fears about, potential failures down, shortly down the road. Just as another tool that we'd be able to rely upon to make sure that we're getting the best deal.
Well, like Member Walter says, this isn't like we're giving them the land, we're getting theirs. It's just a step to move forward. So we'll be visiting it more than one more time, I would think. So anyway, if there's no other discussion, will the clerk call the roll to move forward on this?
Kurt?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Okay, the motion to move ahead with looking into the land swap with Petro passes with a 6-1 vote. Next thing on the item is new business, Board of Equalization. You have something to present to us, Jody, on that, or?
So yes, in your packet on page 106, there's a schedule of the assembly meetings, but also 2 meetings relating to the Board of Equalization. The state assistant assessor will be conducting training in Ketchikan in March, and on his way back up to Juneau, he is willing to stop here. In fact, he's scheduled to stop here on March 22nd. To do some training for the Board of Equalization. We haven't had that in many years, and I think it would be very beneficial. I'm a little worried, though, after the conversation earlier about how many people are not going to be here on the 19th, that no one's going to be here on the 22nd either. So I'm just wondering who's going to be here, if you will be here, and set a time for the meeting, like 6 o'clock or whatever. And then also April 9th will be the scheduled Board of Equalization, and so we need to schedule a time for that too.
So raise your hand if you will be here, please, on March 22nd. We have only Brandy and Nancy.
Yeah. It's really, Mr. Mayor, it's just really hard for me to tell.
Sure.
It's not up to me if I'm here.
Well, and I think, even 2 is great, and I'm going to hope to record it, and so everyone can see it, and
Listen
or
to
at least
it.
listen to it, and it'll be beneficial for staff too. So
This is just training. This is no in no way a
just
formal meeting.
training.
So
No.
whoever can be here can be here.
There's no need for
Yeah.
a forum.
Yeah.
I was hoping maybe you guys could set a time too, then whatever works for you right now tonight.
Which 2 members are going to be here for sure? What time do you guys want to meet?
What time? What time?
Anytime after 4.
Can we do 4?
4?
4's great.
Yeah, 4 is fine.
Yeah.
4 o'clock. March 22nd.
Awesome.
What day is
And
Thursday.
what's the Thursday?
So then, who is going to be in town for the Board of Equalization meeting on April 9?
Can I partway raise my hand? Or?
Yes.
I should be.
Oh, great. And
I'm a
hopefully
half
we
race
won't
also,
even.
Debbie, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
And
So I'm not
hopefully
gonna
we won't
say
even
yes.
have to meet, but if we do,
I should be here.
I just want to, it's reassuring that you'll be here, and if we could set a time for that too, that'd be great.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I have Kurt, Brandy, Eric, and Nancy will be here. I have Jeff,
Well, we're willing.
What?
What day?
Jeff, this is April 9th. I don't know what day is that.
Monday.
It's a Monday.
Monday.
It's a standard
Okay.
meeting.
Jeff, Jay, and Mark as maybes, right?
Yeah, I mean, if, it just depends on how fast the herring fishery goes in my case.
And Clerk Thompson, is there an assembly meeting that day also, or are we just doing it on its own this time? It's not
No,
an
it's
assembly
the
day?
prior-
It's in between,
Perfect,
right?
just
It's
got
the
it.
prior week.
Roger that, thank you.
Yes,
On the
thank you.
3rd.
Member Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you attend the Board of Equalization telephonically, or do you have to be here in person?
You know, a lot of times there's pictures that people bring, so it's very difficult to do it. I don't know the legalities of it, but it's pretty difficult. And like I said, I'm hoping that we won't even have to have a meeting, but if we do, yeah, it's usually a lot easier if you're here.
You know, I don't know if you can vote, and that's a good point for something like that, especially if you're not in the room, if there is visual testimony. That's probably the wrong word to use, but
The state assessor would probably be able to tell us.
Yeah, that would be a good question at training. I'll write it down.
there we go. Good. Okay, so
One
we've got
last
that.
question for clarification, Mr. Mayor. I think you already answered it for me, was that you do have to have a quorum for that?
For the Board of
Yeah,
Equalization?
Board
Yes.
of Equalization.
Yes.
Okay, all right, just so it's clear in my head.
Okay, so on to item B under new business.
I need a time for that, the Board of Equalization.
On
You gave me
April
a-
9th?
You gave me a time for March 22nd's training, but I didn't get a time for
April
the
9th.
April
meeting.
9th.
Well, there's the regular meeting
I would-
depends on what happens.
Not a regular meeting that day.
No.
Oh, on the 9th, April
Yeah, I
9th?
clarified that one. I thought I was wondering.
Oh, it's the second.
Yeah, we have it on the
Let's
second.
look at the calendar. Yeah, okay, well, we're good. So pick a time.
6. People can have dinner, then
It
come.
works for me if I'm here. And sometimes they can go fairly long. It depends on how many, actual
That sounds-
appeals make it to that level.
Sorry, I just need to know to tell people that appeal when it is, so they can plan for it.
So is that a
Thank you.
consensus of the assembly, 6 o'clock?
If I'm here, that'll work.
Okay, yeah.
Longer daylights in April, too, so
Yeah, people
won't
will
be dark by the
be
time we're done.
awake. Okay, next item under new business is Open Meetings Act, and I wanted to have this on the agenda since the last couple meetings, we've had a little discussion about this. Before we discuss it any farther, I'll entertain a motion to hire a third-party attorney for their opinion on this matter.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Castro, seconded by Member Borough. Any comments or any, Member Stanton Gregor, I know you were going to have this on the agenda as a discussion item?
Yeah, it was
I know.
more just curious what your goal is and what part of Sarah's ruling you were not liking, I guess, or questioning.
Well,
just so I can understand what we're doing here better.
Okay, well, let me see if I can run you through my thought processes on this.
Please do, thank you.
The first time this came up is when the attorney made an opinion without listening to the meeting or attending the meeting that the direction it wasn't a change of direction given to the manager to quit recruiting a public power and light superintendent and to hire the two individuals that we've been talking about for those positions. She said that she thought it was I can't remember her exact words, but she felt that was just confirming the manager's position from last May. That was the same opinion as the manager. So I asked the attorney, I said, did you listen to the meeting? She said, no. I said, well, how do you, in my mind, how do you make a decision that's credible if you didn't listen to it yourself? So that kind of made me want to get a different opinion on this. And then Member Borough brought up the violation of the Open Meeting Act after talking to Alaska Municipal League. They said, in their opinion, it was a violation of the Open Meetings Act. And when we were talking about that at the last meeting, the manager said, he talked to the attorney, and she said, well, it's a gray area. So if it's on a gray area, maybe we shouldn't go there. And so, like someone that testified earlier this evening, Member Lynch, said, well, maybe don't do this, but figure out how you're going to handle emails. So I thought, well, that's for a couple $100. whatever, an hour's opinion from a third-party attorney that has nothing to do with the city, unaffiliated with the borough, get an opinion. And then at least we'll know if we're even bordering on a gray area. And if it's, in my opinion, that would clear the air. That's why I...
Understood.
Did I make sense?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that. I guess a clarification from my own processing here is, was that an AML attorney that gave us a written opinion on that? Because Attorney Heidemann gave us a written legal opinion. Did we get one of those from AML?
I don't think the person that got it off, Randy.
No, I did not get a written
It was the
opinion.
person that...
There was two lawyers that did a presentation in which that information is where I originally got it, about serial meetings, and then I called AML and I spoke to someone there and they called someone else, and so between the two of them they decided that they agreed that that would be in violation.
But nothing in writing, like not a legal written opinion like we've gotten from...
I'm not going to pay personally to pay...
I'm just trying to clarify so I understand, Member Morrell. Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's why I put it on here. If we don't want to spend the money, fine. I think it's worth our... worth looking into. Any other member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I guess there's a couple things that are going on here. I mean, every time that we ask the city attorney for a borough attorney for an opinion and we don't like what they say, then are we just going to go out and get an opinion until we find something that we like? Or are we not confident in our city attorney that we should be maybe going out and looking for a different city attorney? I mean, obviously I'm not a lawyer, but these opinions are based on the law and the facts. And I don't understand why it would change the fact that what the laws pertaining to the Open Meetings Act are. I mean, if we're not confident and we're getting good advice from the city attorney, maybe we should be going out looking for a different city attorney. But, yeah.
That is our decision to make, I guess, since the assembly hires the attorney. Any other comments?
Sure.
Member Castro, did you have something?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I don't... I mean, being as that our attorney probably is $250 an hour, I assume that, and she's on retainer, so I don't know how much it would cost necessarily for us to be able to bring in an outside lawyer. So I'm not necessarily for unnecessarily spending taxpayers' monies on this, but like it was brought up during the meeting earlier, I think it'd be interesting to be able to look into the policy that kind of brought about this confusion that all us members are kind of going through.
Everybody's spoken.
I think part of that was that a lot of it's taught in the AML class that, and I know you took that, so, I mean, because they go through, like I said, I mean, they have two lawyers that have broke down every case, and even those two disagree on things, and they work together. And they're like, you know, it's because there's so much that's subject to interpretation that two lawyers working in the same firm on similar different matters can take different stances, and that's where I think you got run into the gray area. And you know, and they've listed in that different cases that that support the serial meetings, and emailing is one of them. So maybe just something that we could all educate ourselves, or I don't know, but I think that we definitely all have a gray area that we are not quite understanding, and we probably should clear that up.
Member Stanton Gregory, you want to?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, I believe voting for this would set a really dangerous precedent for our local government, like beyond the time when 7 of us are sitting here. I mean, as it stands now, Mayor Jensen disagrees with a borough attorney because he disagrees with her opinion. We pay Attorney Heidemann to represent the borough and give us guidance. We follow the rules appropriately. If we make an open meetings violation or any mistake, it's her sole job to advise us of this. Her job is not to rubber stamp, whether it be the assembly, Steve, Jody, Debbie. Her job is only to follow the law. And if we agree to seeking another legal opinion on this issue in the future, I think we'll be setting a precedent that if one assembly member doesn't like Sarah's ruling, let's go shopping for one that potentially fits our bill. I'm not saying that's what's going on right here, but that's a precedent we're opening up. I'm like, I disagree with the borough attorney. I've disagreed with plenty of Sarah's opinions, but I'm not a lawyer. In short, I think voting this would be really, really dangerous for local government and set a precedent that would grind things to a standstill. And I hope my fellow assemblymen and women vote no on this.
Member Strand, did you have your hand
I
up?
agree with the precedent stuff, but attorneys are like the internet. If you look hard enough, you can find plenty of support for your opinion.
Anyway, Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, as we are members of the Alaska Municipal League, I am sure that we could find, if we wanted to direct city staff to find a PowerPoint presentation somewhere online that we could view to look at the Open Meetings Act, and just so that we're all comfortable with it. I mean, it's been a long time since, you know, I studied it, but I am sure we could find something online. I'm taking all kinds of online stuff through work. I mean, it's just, those things are out there that we can certainly direct city staff to get for us in helping us understand the Open Meetings Act maybe better.
We might even be able to get somebody to come and, well, I don't know if they would or not, because they do it every year. The elected officials train in, this is part of it, so. Member Merle, do you have another comment?
I was just going to say, I agree with Jeff. I think that just doing a little training would help.
Any other comments? And it's just a thought, if we don't look for a third-party attorney, I think there's other ways we should keep looking into this to make sure that we're functioning properly. Clerk, call the roll.
Mark.
Yes.
Jay.
No.
Eric.
No.
Jeff.
No.
Nancy.
No.
Kurt.
Nope.
Brandy.
No.
Okay. That motion fails with a 6-1 vote with Mayor Jensen voting for it. Next item on the agenda is a letter to DNR about the timber sales. I'll entertain a motion to approve sending this letter.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made by Member Walhooter, seconded by Member Strand. Any discussion? Member Mucci, do you have your? Oh, just look at, yeah. Anyway, I think it's a good idea, and I think we probably all agree to it. It's kind of a, not in our best interest to let them take this off of our land choices. Well, they're not taking it off. Member Strand?
I have one question. Didn't they do something like this to Wrangell?
Well,
off what they were potentially going to select?
They wouldn't let them select it during borough formation, and then after they logged it, they said they could select it, and Wrangell said no. So it was a little bit different, but same. So anyway, all those in favor of sending a letter, like the draft letter, say aye. Aye. Okay. Debbie will get that off, I'm sure. Okay, next item. Resolution 2018-06 is what it should be called, but I wanted to have this on the agenda. I've had many people from the public ask me if we would go back to all evening meetings. And I said I would give it an attempt. I've tried it before, it didn't work. So before we have any more discussion, I'll entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Merole to adopt Resolution 2018-06. And it's a resolution setting regular Borough Assembly meeting start times to 6 p.m. for the first and third Mondays. Discussion? Member Stan Gregor?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bob Lynn, I think, spoke pretty well to this topic earlier. You know, I know I forgot how many years ago it was now with borough formation, but as many of us remember, it was quite contentious. And it was deemed important to give people outside of Service Area 1 easy access to assembly meetings. Like for me, no time's really good, but I've chosen this volunteer job, so I make it work. People outside of Service Area 1, it was something we did for them. You know, I know it's all subject to change, but it felt like a commitment we made to them so they could be engaged in the process. I know it's the minority part of our population. I think it's really important to protect that minority part to allow them easy access to our democracy. As strikes me as a fair compromise. Like, doing both at noon doesn't work. Doing both at 6, people, not every time works for everyone. It strikes me as a fair compromise in the sense that no one's totally satisfied by it. It's generally, what a good compromise is when neither party is really excited about it. But more importantly, just to reiterate my point, I think it's important for the trust of people outside of Service Area 1 to keep giving them easy access to our democracy, especially in the winter, whether it be on island or off island. So I can't be voting for this.
Any other discussion? Member Beachy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, they did make the motion. I'm not going to vote for it. I've said in the past, I'm not a big proponent of the noon meetings. It's just kind of right in the middle of the day. And I understand that people like the 6 o'clock meeting because the people who are working regular jobs don't get off till 5 or 6. They want to come and participate. But I get it that people sometimes don't want to go out at night. And they have to travel great distances to get here. So I'm going to vote against it. I'm not a fan of the 12 o'clock meetings, but it's not about me.
Any other discussion? Member Castro?
Well, I actually initially, speaking of changes of heart, I initially thought that I was going to vote for this because I was considering new, young, professionals, maybe folks just around the community who have a will to be able to volunteer and to take upon this challenge of being on the assembly, that don't necessarily have the ability to take off time in the middle of the day. And I think to be able to offer, or I thought to be able to offer them the chance to be able to participate, maybe they would be able to make 6 o'clock meetings much easier. But, as Bob Lynn pointed out and Member Stanton Greger reiterated, I feel that it is necessary for us to be able to offer a multitude of opportunities to all the citizens in the community. That's the benefit of being able to have 3 meetings, I suppose, where if you aren't able to make it for the first meeting at noon, then the second meeting you can participate at 6 o'clock. So that's my stance.
Member Strand?
I agree. Bob Lynn presented it very well. By the same token, not everybody works from 9 to 5. Some people can make it at noon, others can make it at 6. And I figure if they have an important enough idea they want to present, they'll make it. But not everybody works a regular shift, so noon is the better time for some.
Okay, any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Jeff?
No.
Mark?
Yep.
Brandy?
No.
Nancy?
No.
Kurt?
Nope.
Eric?
No.
Jay?
Nope.
Thank you.
Starting a trend here. Motion, or the resolution 2018-06 fails with a 6-1 vote with Mayor Jensen in favor. Okay, next item is communications. I don't see any listed. Does anybody have any communications they'd like to put forward? I did give one letter to the clerk and the manager before the meeting. It was from Governor Walker in a response to Kathy Wasserman at AML about, I believe it was revenue sharing, and hopefully you guys get a copy of that. But since then, there was an action taken by the House that kind of reverses that. And I don't know if we all got the email from Kathy Wasserman, but I could forward that on too. So, seeing there's no other communication items, there's assembly discussion items. Recognitions. Does anybody have any recognitions? Member Castro?
Yes, I'd like to recognize the Public Works crew who came out during that nasty 8 inches of slush that was kind of spread all over the road and used the excavators and cleared out the roads, made them safe, and then, following the pressing of the snow across the roads, left 2-foot berms across people's driveway of hard, compacted slush. But then the excavator continued to remove the slush and the nasty icy berm from the street. And I've spoken to a number of folks around town who've had that occur to me, or had that occur to them as well. And I just want to show my appreciation for the crews that allowed that to happen.
Okay, thank you, Member Castro. Any other recognitions before we move on? Next item on the agenda is invitations to Mayfest. Member Bucci wants the Borough to formally invite the U.S. Coast Guard Commandant and his successor to our 2018 Mayfest celebration. And I think the changing of the guard will take place before then, so Member Bucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just, with the ongoing Coast Guard possibly moving the Anacapa out of here and putting something in it, I think anything we can do to invite those guys or those people to town and show them how important the Coast Guard is to this community, it's a good thing. And if there's consensus at the Assembly to do that, I'd like to see a letter go to those guys, invited them here.
Yeah, maybe we could, I don't see anything wrong with it. I think, I don't know if they'll come, but it'd be great if they did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can't hurt
It's
to
a good
ask.
idea.
No. So, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll draft up a letter. The clerk will draft up a letter.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Next item. Okay, planning for the future ideas for the community. This is another discussion item Member Mucci wanted to have on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it was just curious if there was any consensus on the Assembly to hold a work session one night in early March, just to kind of go over the notes from the planning meetings that we had in the community here, to see if there's any consensus for moving forward with some of these ideas or just moving on. I mean, I think we owe it to the community to kind of give our opinions if we think it's a good idea or if we're not going to spend city resources to pursue them farther. I mean, I looked at them tonight. There were some suggestions about closing the library for a couple days a week, taxing fishing boats. I mean, I think there should be some kind of dialogue at the Assembly level to decide if we want to pursue any of those ideas and give direction to the city manager to pursue those ideas for us.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of torn about the idea of having a work session for it. I mean, the manager, we had the 3 meetings, and we had 35 people over 3 meetings. I kind of consider, well, this is just a thought, that could, in a way, could have been considered a work session that people didn't attend, but it's up to the Assembly, I guess. If they want to have a work session, it could be move a little later.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff, not always, but this one, for sure. Problem, Jeff. I think we should probably sit down and maybe prioritize them, and then, so we don't have, a plethora of ideas, that the manager has to kind of wade through on his own. So I think as an assembly, I think we should just kind of figure out which ones, are priority and which ones we assume would work, and then just throw it out there one last time, and just.
Member Merle?
I like the idea of a work session so we can sit down and informally talk about it, and if people want to come and weigh in or just listen, they can. But
Yeah, give them one more chance. Well, there's always more chances. They could come to any meeting they want and voice their opinion. So, is there a date that people would like to do this? It's either now or not until, for my schedule, it's either in the next couple of weeks or it's not until mid-April.
I'd say mid-April would be better, yeah. Give us a chance to read over it and kind of get it in our heads where we're going, instead of, that would be my preference.
I don't think it's a pressing issue.
No, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Does that work for the, what's your, depends on dive depositions and everything else, I know it, yeah, so.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make sure that we continue to look at those things, because people who suggested them are expecting us to say something about them, whether we agree with them or not. So, yeah, whatever works is fine with me.
Okay, regular meetings are the 2nd and the 16th. We could have it,
about towards the end of April.
Yeah, because we have the assessment or the
Board of Equalization.
using the Board of Equalization thing on the 9th-ish, around in there, so maybe the week of the 23rd? Is there any particular day of the week that works for people better than others?
can Debbie just put something
it
tentatively?
gonna be
There you go,
ready?
put it out, and then we'll see where it goes. Then it'll be something we don't all have to be in attendance for. Good idea.
Put it for Monday, the 23rd?
Sure, that's the start.
And do you want daytime, evening time?
I would like it after work hours. personally.
6 p.m.? What time
Assembly
works?
time, 6 p.m.?
6 p.m.
Sure.
There we go.
Okay.
If that doesn't work, we can move it, right?
Yeah, we could change it. I mean,
All right.
okay. One other issue, Assemblymember Mucci requested work session to discuss the Assembly's position on sea otters and the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just been, this issue has been, it's out there, creeping in, and I think it'd be handy to have a work session one night to just kind of go over what the Assembly's position is, or to learn more information about this Marine Mammal Protection Act and how the sea otters play into it. I mean, we've heard from different people that there is an issue. We hear from different people that they have concerns about it that we're not talking about directly, and I think those people would like to be here for those meetings, whether it's Will Ware or the SARTFA folks from the dive fisheries down in Ketchikan. I think we just kind of need to hear a little bit about it and weigh in on some of our thoughts about it, because we are going to be asked to make an opinion on it, and we should be kind of maybe out in front.
Well, I can't remember when it was. Could be close to 2 months ago, month and a half ago, that we agreed to ask for input, and we asked from the, I gave a list of names of hunters to the clerk, and she reached out to all of them, and one replied, I think. And then there was fishing groups at the PVOA and SARFTA, and other ones responded, and Will Ware did respond in the letter, I see that. And if you look around what's happening, well, like Mr. Randrup said earlier, the Board of Fish is even taking a position on it. Wrangell drafted a resolution. Senator Stedman put in a resolution. I would like to, instead of having a work session, this is just my thought, is just put a resolution on the agenda, next agenda, or soon, kind of mirroring Wrangell's resolution. It kind of, calls for co-management, and it calls for more liberal harvest of pelts, and then the people could come and testify on views related to the agenda. Either that, or if it's up to the Assembly. That's how I would like to handle it. But. Member Strand?
It was my impression that Will Ware was not wanting us to do that sort of thing, make a decision for his group. I don't know what he would suggest. A work session, I would just testify. The resolution idea sounds great to me, but...
Well, since this topic has been broached a number of times, and I think our Assembly has even taken a stance on it in the past, if I'm not mistaken. Look back, there might be a couple of resolutions. Maybe even as far back as the council, before the Assembly, before the borough was formed. And you're going to have, there has been native groups that have came out against any kind of harvesting of pelts because it will affect their cottage industries, like Mr. Ware's concern is. But I don't think a cottage industry is going to shrink the otter herd enough to have an effect on the otters, eating up our fishing grounds. So that's going to be part of the discussion. So that's, I think if we start with a resolution, then people will, give them plenty of warning so they have time to get their comments together and come. So, but it's up to the Assembly if you want to have a work session and bring the people in. I mean, I thought we gathered information from sending the letters out and we could draft something from that. But I know it's time to address it, though, Member Bucci, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Mr. Mayor, I just would like to point out, and we have a little leeway, but really, we have to remember, too, that a work session is really set up for the board to discuss. It's not really set up to take input from the community. That would be a special meeting or a regular meeting. You can modify it a little bit, because we have done that, but just keep that in mind. I mean, if you really want to know everybody else's input, it should probably be during a meeting, not during a
public meeting, so it's documented.
Yes.
Member Walter.
I listened to Senator Dan Sullivan today on the radio, and he had brought up the sea otter issue. So I think if we could kind of mirror what Dan is working on and just say, we're behind you, move forward on her.
Well, that's why we asked for these letters of opinion, because was told by his staff that he was going to address the Marine Mammal Protection Act in March. Well, he's a little bit behind, but he's talking about it still. But he is planning on introducing a bill. What it will say, we don't know. Whether we support it or not, who knows what you have to do what it says. So,
Mr. Mayor?
Member Mucci.
Yeah, I say we draft a resolution for the next, if not next Monday's meeting, for the one in March, and send it out to the people who've sent us letters of interest and tell them we're moving forward with this, and if they wanted to weigh in, now's a good time.
And they could also write letters that could be read into the record as well, so they don't have to be here in person, so that's good. So our next meeting, if I'm not mistaken, is in...
Well, March 5th is the
The
next
5th, 2
one.
weeks?
Yeah. 1 week.
1 week.
One
Oh,
week
good.
from today. But if I can
Better.
get a hold of Wrangel's resolution, I can probably knock out something similar.
I've got a copy of it. It was sent to me by a fisherman. If you'd like it, I would forward it to you.
Perfect.
Nice.
So, anyway, entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh, sorry.
See this orange there? That's how long it's going to take me.
That's fine. Mr. Walter has something, other item B, assembly discussion items.
Well, I just want to put this on the record, you know. On February 1st, 1980, they drafted a resolution or an ordinance, you know, for senior citizen sales tax exemption. And I'm just going to read one section here, which is the purpose and the intent. It is the intention of the substantive provision of this ordinance, Section 3 and 4, to create an exemption from the Petersburg consumers' sales tax in favor of and for the exclusive benefit of the elderly, with the intent of alleviating financial hardship. That's point one. And recognizing the valuable contributions which the senior citizens of Petersburg have made and continue to provide. To me, there's like 3 points there that I think that I'm going to try to present this here later on, you know, that you need to fire on 2 cylinders to be eligible for getting tax exempt. You can't just hit 65 and expect to get it. I think you need to be able to have, and we need to define what economic hardship is, and that's already out there. And we can discuss this later. This right now is just a real quick, brief overview of what I'm going to do. And then contributing, and then continuing to contribute, which is your volunteer firemen, which is your anybody who's on an electric board, you know, or somebody who's on the possibly on the Little Norway Fest our committee, on the 4th of July committee, you know, that's 65 years old and is continuing to provide, you know, services to the community. So I'm going to try to get something more concise, and then I'd like to see. You know, because I think Lynch was right. You know, I think a lot of people, if they had an incentive not to do it, they would, you know, pay their taxes. And so I've heard enough people say that if it wasn't so easy, you know, we'd pay. I mean, right now it's just, you just got to hit 65 and that's it. So anyway, that was the original intent in 1980, and I think we've lost that vision. So that's where I want to head.
Entertain a motion to adjourn if you're done.
So move.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. That was a little more than the orange ball.
Sorry.